History isn't buried in textbooks. It drifts beneath oceans, clings to cave walls, and waits beneath our feet. Sometimes it reveals itself during a drought, a construction project, or a lucky dive. These are not just stories of lost ships or forgotten tools. They are reminders that the past is never still. It shifts just beneath the surface. Imagine standing on a foggy coastline at dawn, watching the mist rise from waters that have witnessed countless stories. Below these waves lie ships that sailed when the world was young, their wooden hulls preserved in the cold embrace of the deep. In caves that have known only darkness for millennia, ancient hands once painted by firelight, leaving traces of dreams and fears we can barely comprehend. The earth itself is a storyteller, patient and persistent. It holds secrets in layers of sediment, in fragments of bone and pottery, in the chemical signatures of long-dead fires. When we dig, when we dive, when we simply pay attention to what time has left behind, we discover that the boundary between past and present is far more fluid than we imagine. Consider the metal detector that beeps over a field in England, revealing a hoard of Viking silver that hasn't seen sunlight for 1,000 years. Think of the drought that lowers a lake just enough to expose the ribs of a boat that carried fishermen in the time of ancient empires. Picture the storm that washes a massive tooth onto a beach, the last remnant of a creature so large it could have swallowed a school bus whole. These discoveries don't just tell us about the past, they whisper to us about the nature of time itself, about how the ancient world continues to seep into our modern lives like water through stone. Every artifact is a message in a bottle, cast into the ocean of time by people who lived and loved and wondered about their place in the vastness of existence, just as we do. The stories we're about to explore span continents and centuries. They take us from the misty highlands of Scotland to the warm waters of Florida, from the caves of prehistoric Spain to the depths of the Pacific Ocean. Each tale is a thread in a tapestry so vast that we can only glimpse small sections at a time, marveling at the patterns that emerge when we step back and see how they connect. In these quiet moments of discovery, when a diver's flashlight illuminates a skull that has rested on the ocean floor for decades, or when an archaeologist's brush reveals a fragment of ancient music carved in stone, we are reminded that we are not separate from the deep past. We are its continuation. We are the next chapter in a story that began long before we arrived and will continue long after we are gone. The sea returns what it chooses. The earth reveals its stories grain by grain. For every artifact unearthed, 1,000 more remain hidden beneath waves, within walls under centuries of silence. And in the space between what we know and what we wonder, between the discovered and the lost, lies the endless mystery that connects us all to the forgotten depths of time. In the winter of 1986, the Sea of Galilee began to whisper secrets it had kept for 2 millennia. A severe drought had lowered the ancient waters to levels not seen in living memory, and along the muddy shoreline, something extraordinary began to emerge from the earth like a memory slowly surfacing from a dream. 2 brothers, Moshe and Yuval Lufan, were walking along the newly exposed beach when they noticed an unusual outline in the mud. At first, it looked like nothing more than a shadow cast by the late afternoon sun, but as they drew closer, they could see the unmistakable curve of a boat's hull, its wooden ribs dark against the pale sediment that had protected it for so long. The moment of discovery was electric. The brothers had grown up near these waters, had walked these shores countless times, but they had never seen anything like this. The drought had been severe, dropping the lake level by nearly 4 meters, exposing sections of the shoreline that had been underwater for decades. What they were looking at was not driftwood or debris, but something far more ancient and significant. The boat they discovered was not just any vessel. It was a fishing boat from the 1st century, built during the time when the Roman Empire cast its shadow over the land of ancient Israel. The wood was perfectly preserved, held in a state of suspended animation by the unique combination of mud and minerals that had sealed it away from the decay of time. When archaeologists carefully excavated the vessel, they found it measured 8.5 meters long and 2.5 meters wide, constructed from cedar planks and oak frames using techniques that had been passed down through generations of Mediterranean boat builders. The excavation itself was a race against time. Once exposed to air, the waterlogged wood would begin to deteriorate rapidly. The archaeological team, led by Shelley Waxman, worked around the clock to carefully expose and document every detail of the boat before it could be damaged. They used dental tools and soft brushes to remove centuries of sediment, revealing the vessel piece by piece like a sculpture emerging from stone. Radiocarbon dating confirmed what the researchers had hoped but hardly dared to believe. The boat was indeed from the 1st century, built sometime between the years 50 BC and 50 AD. The wood itself told a story of careful craftsmanship and resourcefulness. The builders had used 12 different types of wood, suggesting that timber was precious and every scrap was valued. Some of the planks showed signs of repair, evidence that this was a working boat, probably used by fishermen who depended on it for their livelihood. The variety of wood types used in construction tells us something profound about the economy and environment of the time. Cedar and oak were the primary materials, but the builders also incorporated pine, willow, and even redbud wood. This suggests that the boat was built during a period when good timber was scarce, perhaps due to deforestation or economic hardship. Every piece of usable wood was carefully shaped and fitted, creating a vessel that was both functional and beautiful in its practicality. The discovery sent ripples of excitement through the archaeological community and beyond. Here was a vessel that had sailed the same waters mentioned in ancient texts, that had perhaps witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the coming and going of countless generations. The boat became known as the Jesus boat, though archaeologists prefer the more neutral term, the Sea of Galilee boat, acknowledging that while it dates to the right period, there is no direct evidence linking it to any specific historical figure. The construction techniques revealed in the boat tell us about the skilled craftsmen who built it. The planks were joined using the mortise and tenon method, where wooden pegs fit into carefully carved holes, creating joints that could flex with the movement of the water without breaking apart. The builders used no nails, relying instead on wooden dowels and the natural properties of the wood to create a vessel that was both strong and flexible. This was Mediterranean boat building at its finest, techniques that had been perfected over centuries of trial and error. What makes this discovery so haunting is not just its age, but the window it opens into daily life 2,000 years ago. This was not a royal barge or a merchant vessel loaded with exotic goods. It was an ordinary fishing boat, the kind that would have been a common sight on the lake in ancient times. The fishermen who built it and sailed it lived in a world very different from ours, yet their needs were fundamentally the same. They sought safety on the water, a good catch to feed their families, and the hope that their boat would carry them home each evening. The political landscape of 1st century Palestine was complex and often turbulent. The region was under Roman occupation, and the local population lived under the constant tension of foreign rule. Fishing was one of the few stable occupations, providing both food and income for communities around the lake. The Sea of Galilee was rich with fish, and the towns that dotted its shores, places like Capernaum and Tiberias, thrived on the fishing trade. The lake itself was a highway of commerce and communication. Boats like this one carried not just fish, but people, goods, and ideas across the water. The Sea of Galilee is only 21 kilometers long and 13 kilometers wide, but it was the center of a thriving regional economy. Tax collectors worked the harbors, merchants traded in the markets, and fishermen like those who sailed this boat provided the protein that sustained the growing population of the region. Archaeological evidence from sites around the lake reveals a sophisticated network of fish processing facilities, with installations for salting and preserving catches that would be transported throughout the region. The discovery of the boat provides a tangible connection to this ancient economy, a reminder that behind every historical event were ordinary people living ordinary lives, casting their nets in the early morning light and mending them by lamplight in the evening. The types of fish caught in the Sea of Galilee 2,000 years ago were much the same as those found today. Tilapia, known locally as St. Peter's fish, was the most common catch, along with various species of carp and sardines. The fishing was seasonal, with the best catches often coming during the cooler months when the fish moved closer to the surface. Fishermen worked in teams, using large nets that required multiple boats to deploy effectively. The boat we found was perfectly sized for this kind of cooperative fishing, designed to work in harmony with other vessels rather than alone. The preservation of the boat was nothing short of miraculous. The combination of low oxygen levels in the lake mud and the presence of certain minerals created an environment where organic materials could survive for millennia. The sediment that covered the boat was fine and almost clay-like, creating a seal that protected the wood from the bacteria and insects that would normally cause decay. When the boat was first exposed, it was as fragile as wet paper, requiring an extraordinary conservation effort to prevent it from crumbling to dust. The conservation process was as remarkable as the discovery itself. The entire vessel was encased in a specially designed polyurethane foam and transported to a conservation laboratory, where it underwent a painstaking process of preservation that took over a decade to complete. The waterlogged wood had to be slowly dried using a process called polyethylene glycol impregnation, where the water in the wood is gradually replaced with a synthetic polymer that maintains the wood's structure while preventing shrinkage and cracking. During the conservation process, researchers made additional discoveries that deepened their understanding of the boat's history. They found traces of tar and pitch that had been used to seal the joints, evidence of the ongoing maintenance that kept the vessel seaworthy. They discovered wear patterns on the gunnels where ropes had been tied countless times, grooves worn smooth by decades of use. Even the nails that held some of the later repairs were analyzed, revealing that they were made from locally smelted iron, probably forged by blacksmiths in nearby towns. The boat's final voyage remains a mystery. There are no obvious signs of violence or catastrophic damage that would explain why it was abandoned. It's possible that it simply reached the end of its useful life and was deliberately sunk to prevent it from becoming a hazard to navigation. Or perhaps it was caught in a storm and driven ashore, where it gradually sank into the protective mud. We may never know the exact circumstances, but the boat's peaceful rest in the lake bottom suggests that its end was not violent or traumatic. Today, the boat rests in a climate-controlled museum at Kibbutz Ginosar, its ancient wood still bearing the marks of the tools that shaped it. Visitors can see the holes where wooden pegs once held the planks together, the wear patterns that show where ropes were tied, the careful repairs that extended its working life. It stands as a testament to human ingenuity and the enduring power of craftsmanship, a bridge across 2,000 years of history. The museum where the boat is displayed has been designed to evoke the feeling of being underwater, with soft lighting and curved walls that suggest the depths where the vessel rested for so long. The boat sits in a shallow pool surrounded by mist that rises from hidden vents, creating an atmosphere that is both mysterious and peaceful. Visitors often speak in hushed tones, as if they are in the presence of something sacred, something that connects them directly to the ancient world. The boat that waited in the mud of the Sea of Galilee reminds us that the past is always present, just beneath the surface of our everyday world. It lay hidden for millennia, until the lake receded just enough for history to exhale, releasing its secrets into the light of a new day. In the mist-shrouded waters of Scotland's ancient lochs, where the boundary between land and water shifts like memory itself, lie some of humanity's most remarkable architectural achievements. These are not natural islands born from geological forces, but carefully constructed platforms rising from the depths, built by human hands over thousands of years. They are called crannogs, and they represent one of the longest continuous building traditions in human history. The word crannog comes from the Scottish Gaelic cran, meaning tree, a fitting name for structures that were often built from massive timber piles driven deep into the loch bed. But these artificial islands were far more than simple wooden platforms. They were sophisticated engineering projects that required intimate knowledge of water levels, seasonal changes, and the subtle physics of weight distribution across unstable ground. To understand the true scale of crannog building, one must first appreciate the landscape in which they were created. The Scottish Highlands are a land of countless lochs, from vast expanses like Loch Lomond to tiny mountain tarns hidden in remote glens. Each body of water presented its own challenges and opportunities for the ancient builders. The depth of the water, the nature of the loch bed, the prevailing winds, and the seasonal fluctuations in water level all had to be carefully considered before construction could begin. The earliest crannog builders were working with Stone Age technology, yet they achieved engineering feats that would challenge modern construction crews. Without metal tools, mechanical lifting equipment, or even the wheel, they moved massive stones and timber beams, creating structures that have survived for millennia beneath the waters of Scotland's lochs. Their tools were simple: carved bone, sharpened stone, and wooden levers, but their understanding of physics and engineering was sophisticated beyond anything we might expect from prehistoric peoples. Imagine standing on the shore of Loch Tay on a foggy morning 6,000 years ago, watching as your ancestors carefully place stone after stone beneath the dark water, building up a foundation that will support an entire community. The work is backbreaking and dangerous, but the vision is clear. In a land where defensible positions are precious and dry ground is often scarce, these hand-built islands offer something invaluable: security, isolation, and control over the surrounding waters. The selection of a crannog site was a decision that could determine the success or failure of an entire community. The ideal location needed to balance several competing factors. The water had to be deep enough to provide protection from land-based attacks, but not so deep that construction became impossible. The loch bed needed to be stable enough to support the massive weight of the finished structure, yet not so rocky that driving wooden piles became impossible. The site had to be accessible by boat, but not so obvious that it would attract unwanted attention from enemies. Once a site was chosen, the real work began. The construction process started during the dry season, when water levels were at their lowest. Teams of workers would wade into the cold loch water, feeling their way across the muddy bottom with their feet, searching for the firmest ground. The cold highland water numbed their legs, and the work was slow and treacherous, but it was essential to get the foundation right. The construction of a crannog was a community effort that could take months or even years to complete. The builders began by selecting a site, usually in water that was deep enough to provide protection but shallow enough to make construction feasible. They would then begin the laborious process of creating a foundation using whatever materials were available locally. Some crannogs were built on natural rocky outcrops that were expanded and leveled. Others were constructed entirely from scratch, using millions of carefully placed stones to create an artificial platform. The logistics of crannog construction were staggering. A single medium-sized crannog might require tens of thousands of stones, each one carried to the site by hand or transported in dugout canoes. The builders had to work around the seasonal rhythms of highland weather, racing to complete critical stages before winter storms made water work impossible. They learned to read the subtle signs that predicted changes in water level, timing their work to take advantage of natural low water periods. The most impressive crannogs were built using a technique that seems almost impossible given the technology available to prehistoric builders. Massive wooden posts, often made from oak trees that had been growing for centuries, were driven deep into the loch bed using nothing but human muscle and simple tools. These posts, some of them over 10 meters long, formed the skeletal framework around which the island would be built. The spaces between the posts were filled with stones, creating a solid platform that could support the weight of buildings, people, and livestock. The process of driving these massive posts into the loch bed was a feat of engineering that required both strength and precision. Teams of workers would position the post vertically, then use a combination of ropes, levers, and coordinated lifting to raise heavy stone hammers high above the post. The rhythmic pounding that echoed across the loch as these hammers fell must have been audible for kilometers, a steady beat that announced to the world that something significant was being built. Each post had to be perfectly positioned, as any deviation from the planned layout could compromise the entire structure. The builders used simple but effective surveying techniques, probably involving stretched ropes and wooden stakes, to ensure that their foundation was level and properly aligned. The precision they achieved, working entirely by eye and hand, is remarkable by any standard. Recent underwater surveys using sophisticated sonar equipment have revealed that Scotland's lochs contain thousands more crannogs than previously thought. What archaeologists once believed to be a relatively rare phenomenon is now understood to be one of the most common types of ancient settlement in the Scottish Highlands. Loch Tay alone contains over 20 crannogs, and new ones are being discovered regularly as survey technology improves. The distribution of crannogs across the Scottish landscape tells us something important about the societies that built them. They are not randomly scattered, but follow clear patterns that reflect ancient trade routes, territorial boundaries, and resource management strategies. Many crannogs are positioned to control key waterways or to oversee important fishing grounds. Others seem to be placed to take advantage of specific microclimates or to access particular types of stone or timber. The underwater surveys have also revealed the incredible diversity of crannog designs. While all share the basic concept of an artificial island, the specific construction techniques vary enormously depending on local conditions and cultural preferences. Some crannogs are circular, others rectangular. Some rise just barely above the water surface, while others tower several meters above the loch. Some are connected to shore by permanent causeways, while others can only be reached by boat. The longevity of the crannog tradition is perhaps its most remarkable aspect. While other building styles came and went, crannogs continued to be built and inhabited for over 6,000 years, from the Neolithic period through the medieval era and even into the 17th century. This represents one of the longest continuous architectural traditions in human history, a testament to the effectiveness of the design and the deep connection between the Scottish people and their watery landscape. The survival of crannog building techniques across such vast spans of time suggests that knowledge was being carefully preserved and passed down through generations. In a largely illiterate society, this meant that master builders were repositories of incredibly valuable technical knowledge. They understood not just how to build crannogs, but why certain techniques worked and others failed. They knew which types of wood were best for underwater construction, how to predict and compensate for seasonal changes in water level, and how to repair and maintain structures that were constantly under assault from the elements. The earliest crannogs date back to around 4000 BC during the Neolithic period when agriculture was first taking hold in Scotland. These early artificial islands were relatively simple affairs, small platforms that supported single families or small groups. But as time passed and communities grew more sophisticated, so did their island building techniques. By the Iron Age, some crannogs had become elaborate complexes with multiple buildings, sophisticated drainage systems, and even gardens. The evolution of crannog design over time reflects broader changes in Scottish society. The earliest crannogs were probably built by egalitarian communities where decisions were made collectively and resources were shared relatively equally. As social hierarchies developed and wealth became more concentrated, crannogs began to reflect these changes. Later crannogs often feature elaborate roundhouses that clearly housed important families, while smaller structures presumably accommodated servants or retainers. The purposes of crannogs varied greatly over time and location. Some were clearly defensive, built during periods of conflict when control of waterways was crucial for trade and military advantage. Others seem to have been primarily residential, offering the prestige and privacy that came with living on your own private island. Still others appear to have had ritual or ceremonial functions, serving as sacred spaces where communities gathered for important ceremonies or religious observances. The defensive crannogs were often built during times of particular stress or conflict. The positioning of these structures reveals much about the political geography of ancient Scotland. They control river mouths, guard mountain passes, and oversee the most productive fishing grounds. Some are clearly part of larger defensive networks positioned to provide mutual support and communication across the landscape. Archaeological excavations of crannogs have revealed a wealth of information about daily life in ancient Scotland. The waterlogged conditions that preserved the wooden structures also preserved organic materials that would normally decay, giving us an unusually complete picture of how these island communities lived. Wooden bowls, leather shoes, textile fragments, and even food remains have been found in remarkable states of preservation. Among the most fascinating discoveries have been the remains of food and cooking implements. Crannog dwellers ate a varied diet that included fish from the surrounding waters, game from the nearby hills, and agricultural products grown either on the crannog itself or on mainland fields. Archaeologists have found evidence of sophisticated food storage techniques, including underground cellars and specialized containers for preserving meat and grain through the long Highland winters. The preservation conditions on some crannogs have allowed archaeologists to recover textiles that provide rare insights into prehistoric Scottish clothing and crafts. Fragments of woolen cloth, some still showing traces of natural dyes, tell us about the skill of ancient weavers and the importance of sheep herding in the Highland economy. Leather goods from simple straps to elaborate decorated items show the range of uses that crannog dwellers found for animal hides. One of the most fascinating discoveries has been the sophisticated understanding of hydraulics that crannog builders possessed. Many crannogs were equipped with elaborate drainage systems that kept the living areas dry while allowing water to circulate underneath the structures. Some had artificial wells that provided fresh water, while others featured complex systems of channels and sluices that controlled water flow around the island. The engineering behind these drainage systems was remarkably sophisticated. The builders had to understand not just how water moved, but how to predict and control its movement in a constantly changing environment. They created systems that could handle seasonal flooding while maintaining structural integrity, and they did it all without any of the mathematical tools or engineering knowledge that we take for granted today. Some crannogs featured elaborate water management systems that went far beyond simple drainage. Archaeologists have discovered evidence of fish traps and eel weirs that were integrated into the crannog structure itself, turning the artificial island into a productive fishing platform. Other crannogs had boathouses built into their foundations, providing secure storage for the vessels that were essential for island life. The social organization required to build and maintain crannogs was considerable. These were not projects that could be undertaken by individuals or even single families. They required the coordinated effort of entire communities, with specialized knowledge passed down through generations. The master builders who understood the complexities of underwater construction were likely highly respected members of society, their skills as valuable as those of any metalworker or warrior. The communities that lived on crannogs developed unique social structures adapted to their island existence. Space was always at a premium, so every square meter had to be used efficiently. Archaeological evidence suggests that crannog communities were highly organized, with clear divisions of space for different activities and social groups. The largest buildings were typically positioned at the center of the island, while smaller structures were arranged around the perimeter. Life on a crannog required a high degree of cooperation and mutual dependence. The island community had to work together to maintain the structure, manage resources, and defend against threats. This close-knit existence probably fostered strong social bonds, but it also meant that conflicts within the community could be particularly disruptive. The archaeological record suggests that most crannog communities were stable over long periods, implying that they developed effective ways of managing internal disputes and maintaining social harmony. The defensive advantages of crannogs were significant. Surrounded by water, they could only be approached by boat, making them extremely difficult to attack. The wooden walkways or causeways that connected some crannogs to the shore could be quickly destroyed in times of danger, turning the island into an impregnable fortress. The elevated position also provided excellent views of the surrounding area, allowing inhabitants to spot approaching threats from a great distance. But the defensive advantages came with significant costs. Life on a crannog was inherently more challenging than life on dry land. Everything had to be transported to the island by boat, from building materials to food supplies. Fresh water was often a problem, as was waste disposal. The constant dampness took a toll on both buildings and inhabitants, and the risk of fire was always present in structures built primarily from wood and thatch. But crannogs were more than just defensive positions. They were statements of power and prestige, visible symbols of a community's wealth and technical ability. The effort required to build and maintain an artificial island was enormous, and only successful communities could afford such projects. Living on a crannog marked you as someone of importance, someone who could command the resources and labor necessary to literally reshape the landscape. The prestige aspect of crannog ownership is reflected in the elaborate decorative elements found on some sites. Archaeological excavations have uncovered carved wooden posts, decorated pottery, and elaborate metalwork that clearly served ceremonial rather than practical purposes. These items suggest that crannogs were not just functional structures, but also important symbols in the complex web of status and power that characterized ancient Scottish society. The decline of crannog building coincided with changes in Scottish society and technology. As feudalism took hold and stone castles became the preferred method of fortification, the ancient tradition of island building gradually faded. The last crannogs were built in the 17th century, marking the end of a tradition that had lasted for over 6 millennia. The reasons for the decline of crannog building were complex and varied by region. In some areas, political changes made the defensive advantages of island life less important. In others, new construction techniques and materials made stone castles more attractive than wooden islands. Economic changes also played a role, as the specialized skills needed for crannog construction became less valued in a society that was increasingly oriented toward different types of agriculture and trade. Today, most crannogs lie hidden beneath the dark waters of Scotland's lochs, visible only to underwater archaeologists and the occasional lucky diver. But their legacy lives on in the landscape itself, in the subtle patterns of stones beneath the water and the place names that still remember their presence. Many Scottish lochs have names that reference these ancient structures, preserving in language what time has hidden beneath the waves. Modern technology is revealing new details about these ancient structures almost daily. Underwater robots equipped with cameras and sonar can now explore crannog sites in detail without disturbing the delicate archaeological remains. Laser scanning technology can create incredibly precise three-dimensional maps of submerged structures, allowing researchers to study construction techniques and architectural details that would have been impossible to document just a few decades ago. The story of Scotland's crannogs reminds us that human ingenuity has always found ways to adapt to challenging environments. These artificial islands represent thousands of years of accumulated knowledge, passed down through generations of builders who understood that sometimes the best way to find solid ground is to build it yourself, one stone at a time, rising from the depths of ancient waters. In places where the land ends, people shaped their own, creating islands of human ambition that rose from the depths like dreams made manifest in stone and timber. In the rolling hills outside Madrid, where the Spanish sun beats down on landscapes that have witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of something so ancient and fundamental that it challenges our understanding of what it means to be human. Here, buried beneath layers of sediment and time, lie the remains of fires that burned 250,000 years ago, tended by hands that belonged not to our own species, but to our distant relatives, Homo heidelbergensis. The site, known as Quesum Cave, represents one of the earliest known examples of structured fire use in human history. But this is not simply about the discovery of ancient ashes or charcoal fragments. What makes this find extraordinary is the evidence of repeated, intentional fire-making over thousands of years, suggesting a level of cognitive sophistication and social organization that we are only beginning to understand. Imagine the world as it existed 250,000 years ago. The climate was different, the landscape was wilder, and the creatures that roamed the earth included species that have long since vanished into the mists of prehistory. Ice ages came and went like slow breathing, reshaping continents and driving the evolution of life in directions we can barely comprehend. In this ancient world, our ancestors were learning to harness one of nature's most powerful and dangerous forces. Fire was not something that early humans could take for granted. Unlike the controlled flames we summon with the flick of a switch or the strike of a match, fire in the prehistoric world was precious, difficult to create, and even more difficult to maintain. The ability to make and control fire represented a revolution in human capability, one that would ultimately separate our lineage from all other creatures on Earth. The evidence from the Madrid site suggests that these ancient fire makers were not simply opportunistic users of natural fires caused by lightning strikes or volcanic activity. Instead, they were deliberately creating and maintaining fires in specific locations, returning to the same spots again and again over periods that may have spanned centuries. The archaeological layers tell a story of continuous habitation and fire use that speaks to a level of planning and foresight that we might not expect from such ancient peoples. The process of creating fire without modern tools requires not just technical knowledge, but also patience, skill, and an understanding of the subtle properties of different materials. The fire makers of ancient Spain would have needed to know which types of wood burned best, which stones could be used to create sparks, and how to arrange fuel to maintain a steady flame. They would have had to understand the importance of dry tinder, the way wind affects combustion, and the delicate balance between too much fuel and too little. But perhaps most importantly, they would have had to develop social structures that allowed this precious knowledge to be passed down from generation to generation. Fire-making was not something that could be learned quickly or casually. It required apprenticeship, practice, and the kind of cultural continuity that suggests these ancient peoples had developed sophisticated systems of education and knowledge transfer. The hearth sites discovered near Madrid show clear evidence of organization and planning. The fires were not random blazes, but carefully constructed features with prepared fire beds, arrangements of stones to control heat and airflow, and designated areas for different activities. Some areas seem to have been used for cooking, others for tool making, and still others for what can only be described as social gathering spaces where the community came together around the warmth and light of the flames. The analysis of soil samples from around these ancient hearths has revealed microscopic evidence of the activities that took place there. Tiny fragments of bone show that meat was cooked and processed near the fires. Stone chips and debris indicate that tools were manufactured in the firelight. Pollen analysis suggests that certain plants were deliberately brought to the site, perhaps for food, medicine, or to create specific types of smoke. One of the most intriguing aspects of these ancient fire sites is the evidence they provide for early human social behavior. Fire creates a natural gathering place, a center around which communities can form. The warmth and light of a fire extends the usable hours of the day, allowing for activities and conversations that would be impossible in darkness. The shared responsibility of maintaining a fire requires cooperation and planning, fostering the kind of social bonds that would become essential for human survival and development. The discovery of these quarter-million-year-old hearths has profound implications for our understanding of human cognitive evolution. The ability to make and control fire requires abstract thinking, planning for the future, and the kind of causal reasoning that was once thought to be unique to modern humans. It suggests that our ancestors were capable of complex thought and sophisticated social organization much earlier than previously believed. The technical analysis of the hearth sites has revealed surprising details about the sophistication of these ancient fire makers. The arrangement of stones around the fire pits shows an understanding of heat retention and airflow that would not look out of place in a modern outdoor cooking setup. The selection of fuel wood demonstrates knowledge of the burning properties of different tree species. The positioning of the hearths within the cave system shows an appreciation for the way smoke and heat move through enclosed spaces. But beyond the technical aspects, these ancient fires speak to something deeper about the human experience. Fire has always been more than just a tool for cooking or warmth. It is a symbol of home, of civilization, of the boundary between the human world and the wild darkness beyond. The people who tended these flames a quarter-million years ago were participating in a tradition that continues to this day. Every time we light a candle, start a campfire, or gather around a fireplace. The social implications of controlled fire use extend far beyond the immediate practical benefits. Fire creates a focal point for community life, a place where stories are told, knowledge is shared, and social bonds are strengthened. The evidence from the Madrid site suggests that these ancient peoples understood this social dimension of fire, creating spaces that were clearly designed for group activities rather than individual tasks. The preservation of these ancient hearth sites is remarkable in itself. Fire normally destroys organic material, but under the right conditions, it can also preserve it. The intense heat of the fires altered the surrounding soil chemistry in ways that protected microscopic evidence from decay. Archaeologists have been able to recover not just charcoal and ash, but also tiny fragments of the materials that were burned, the tools that were used, and even traces of the food that was cooked. The dating of these sites has been confirmed through multiple independent methods, leaving no doubt about their extreme antiquity. Radiocarbon dating of charcoal fragments, thermoluminescence dating of heated stones, and paleomagnetic analysis of the sediment layers all point to the same conclusion. These fires burned when the world was young, when our own species did not yet exist, when the future of human civilization was still hanging in the balance. The people who created these fires, Homo heidelbergensis, were in many ways similar to modern humans, but also profoundly different. They had brains that were nearly as large as ours, but they lacked the sophisticated tool-making abilities and artistic expression that characterize our own species. They lived in small groups, probably extended families, and their lives were dominated by the constant search for food and shelter. Yet they possessed the intelligence and social organization necessary to master fire, one of the most important technological breakthroughs in human history. The contrast between these ancient firemakers and the traditional image of prehistoric peoples as crude cave dwellers could not be more stark. The evidence from Madrid and similar sites around the world is painting a picture of early humans as sophisticated, thoughtful beings who were capable of complex planning and innovative problem-solving. They were not simply reacting to their environment, but actively shaping it through the controlled use of fire. The legacy of these ancient firemakers extends far beyond the archaeological record. Every fire that has ever been lit, from the hearths of medieval castles to the engines of space rockets, can trace its lineage back to those first controlled flames. The mastery of fire was the first step on a journey that would eventually lead to agriculture, metallurgy, industrialization, and all the other technological achievements that define human civilization. The discovery of these quarter-million-year-old hearths reminds us that the human story is far older and more complex than we often realize. Our ancestors were not waiting for history to begin, they were actively creating it, one carefully tended fire at a time. In the flickering light of those ancient flames, we can see the very beginnings of everything that would make us human. The fires that burned near Madrid so long ago have long since turned to ash and memory, but their legacy lives on in every flame that dances in darkness, in every gathering that forms around warmth and light. A fire still tells stories, even when the flames are long gone, and the stories these ancient hearths tell us are about the birth of human civilization itself, sparked into life by the same element that continues to warm our hearts and light our way through the darkness of an uncertain world. In a field in Herefordshire, England, where the soil holds secrets layered like pages in an ancient book, two men with metal detectors made a discovery that would forever change how we understand Viking influence in medieval Britain. But this is not a story of triumphant archaeology or careful scientific excavation. This is a tale of greed, deception, and the tragic loss of irreplaceable historical knowledge, a reminder that some treasures reveal as much about modern human nature as they do about the distant past. George Powell and Leighton Davies were amateur treasure hunters, part of a growing community of metal-detecting enthusiasts who spend their weekends searching fields and beaches for lost coins, jewelry, and other artifacts. On the surface, their hobby seemed harmless enough, even potentially beneficial to archaeology when conducted legally and with proper reporting. But what they discovered in that Herefordshire field in 2014 would test the boundaries between legitimate treasure hunting and criminal theft of cultural heritage. The hoard they uncovered was extraordinary by any measure. Buried sometime in the 9th or 10th century, it contained over 300 items of silver and gold, including arm rings, ingots, coins, and elaborately decorated talks that spoke to the wealth and sophistication of Viking-age trade networks. The sheer quantity of precious metal represented a fortune that would have made its original owner one of the wealthiest individuals of the early medieval period. The story of how this treasure came to be buried in an English field begins in the turbulent centuries when Viking longships prowled the coasts of Britain and Ireland, their crews seeking plunder, slaves, and new lands to settle. The Vikings were not merely raiders, as popular imagination often portrays them, but sophisticated traders, craftsmen, and explorers whose influence extended from Greenland in the west to Constantinople in the east. They established trading posts, founded cities, and created a vast network of commerce that connected distant corners of the medieval world. The silver and gold in the Herefordshire hoard tell the story of this far-reaching Viking world. Among the coins were examples from Anglo-Saxon England, Carolingian France, Islamic Spain, and even distant Byzantium. Each coin was a small piece of evidence for the incredible distances that Viking traders traveled, the diverse cultures they encountered, and the complex web of economic relationships that characterized the early medieval period. The arm rings and ingots in the hoard represent a different aspect of Viking culture, the use of precious metal as a standardized medium of exchange. Before the widespread adoption of coined money, Viking traders used what archaeologists call a weight-based economy. where pieces of silver and gold were valued according to their mass rather than their artistic or symbolic content. The hack silver found in hoards like this one shows clear evidence of being cut and weighed, treated as raw material rather than finished objects. But the most spectacular items in the hoard were the intact torques and decorative objects that showcase the artistic sophistication of Viking Age metalworkers. These pieces, with their intricate knotwork patterns and stylized animal motifs, represent some of the finest examples of early medieval craftsmanship ever discovered. They were not just valuable for their metal content, but were works of art that would have carried immense prestige and symbolic meaning for their owners. The decision to bury such a valuable collection would not have been made lightly. In the violent and uncertain world of early medieval Britain, where Viking raids could strike without warning and political alliances shifted like storm clouds, wealthy individuals often chose to hide their most precious possessions rather than risk losing them to raiders or rival lords. Many such hoards were never recovered, their owners killed in battle or forced to flee before they could return for their buried wealth. The location of the Herefordshire hoard, near the Welsh border in an area that saw frequent conflict between Anglo-Saxon kingdoms and Welsh princes, makes perfect sense in this context. This was frontier territory where the threat of violence was constant, and the safest bank was often a hole in the ground marked only in the memory of its creator. The fact that the hoard remained buried for over 1,000 years suggests that its owner never had the chance to return, their secret dying with them in some long-forgotten conflict. What should have been a triumph of archaeological discovery became instead a tragedy of modern greed and short-sightedness. Rather than reporting their find to the proper authorities as required by British law, Powell and Davies chose to exploit their discovery for personal gain. They sold some items immediately, melted down others for their metal value, and attempted to hide the true extent of their find from the authorities who might have ensured its proper study and preservation. The legal framework surrounding treasure finds in Britain is designed to balance the interests of discoverers, landowners, and the public. Under the Treasure Act, significant finds must be reported to the local coroner, who determines whether they qualify as treasure belonging to the Crown. If so, museums have the opportunity to acquire the items at fair market value, with the proceeds shared between the finder and the landowner. This system has worked well for decades, encouraging responsible metal detecting while ensuring that important discoveries reach museums where they can be studied and displayed for public benefit. But Powell and Davies chose to circumvent this system entirely. They sold items privately to dealers and collectors, destroying the archaeological context that would have allowed researchers to understand how and why the hoard was assembled and buried. They failed to report the find promptly as required by law, and when they finally did make a partial declaration, they grossly understated the number and value of the items they had discovered. The investigation that followed revealed the full extent of their deception. Forensic archaeologists examining the find site discovered that the men had not only failed to report items they had found, but had actually returned to the site multiple times, conducting what amounted to an illegal excavation that destroyed invaluable archaeological evidence. The soil that surrounded the buried objects could have told researchers about the environmental conditions at the time of burial, the way the objects were arranged, and countless other details that are now lost forever. The trial of Powell and Davies became a landmark case in British archaeology, highlighting the ongoing tension between amateur treasure hunters and professional archaeologists. While many metal detectorists work closely with museums and archaeological units, reporting their finds promptly and preserving archaeological context, the actions of a few irresponsible individuals can cause irreparable damage to our understanding of the past. The prosecution was able to prove that the men had deliberately concealed the true extent of their find, selling items worth hundreds of thousands of pounds while declaring only a fraction of what they had actually discovered. The use of mobile phone evidence, financial records, and forensic examination of the find site built an overwhelming case against them. In 2019, both men were sentenced to substantial prison terms, sending a clear message about the seriousness with which British courts view heritage crime. But the legal victory could not undo the damage that had been done. Many of the most valuable and historically significant items from the hoard had been sold to private collectors and may never be recovered. The archaeological context that could have provided crucial information about Viking Age burial practices and economic relationships had been destroyed by the men's crude excavation methods. An irreplaceable piece of British history had been scattered to the winds by greed and ignorance. The surviving items from the hoard that were recovered by police provide tantalizing glimpses of what has been lost. The craftsmanship evident in the intact torques and arm rings speaks to the sophisticated artistic traditions of the Viking world. The mix of coins from different kingdoms and cultures illustrates the vast geographical scope of early medieval trade networks. Each piece tells part of a story that we can now never fully understand because of the context that was destroyed. The impact of the case extends far beyond the immediate loss of the Herefordshire hoard. It has highlighted the need for better education about archaeological best practices among metal-detecting communities, stronger enforcement of heritage protection laws, and more resources for museums and archaeological units to handle treasure finds appropriately. The case has also sparked debates about whether the current legal framework provides sufficient deterrent against heritage crime. Modern technology has made it easier than ever for unscrupulous treasure hunters to dispose of their finds through online marketplaces and international dealers. The global market for antiquities provides ready buyers for items with dubious provenance, creating financial incentives for those willing to break the law. The Herefordshire case demonstrates the need for international cooperation in combating heritage crime and stronger regulation of the antiquities trade. The story of the Viking treasure that should never have been found serves as a sobering reminder of the fragility of our archaeological heritage. Every artifact that is torn from its context without proper recording represents a piece of human history that is lost forever. The actions of Powell and Davies not only deprived the public of the chance to see and learn from these remarkable objects, but also robbed future generations of the knowledge that proper archaeological investigation could have provided. The legal proceedings revealed disturbing details about the extent of the men's deception and the casual way they treated objects of immense historical significance. Text messages between them joked about melting down silver artifacts for their metal value, showing a complete disregard for the cultural and historical importance of their finds. This attitude stands in stark contrast to the careful reverence that responsible archaeologists and metal detectorists show for the material remains of the past. The ongoing efforts to recover missing items from the hoard have had mixed success. Some pieces have been identified in museum collections or private hands and have been returned, but many remain missing and are presumed to have been sold to collectors who may not even be aware of their illicit provenance. The fragmentary nature of what survives makes it impossible to fully understand the original composition and significance of the hoard. The educational impact of the case has been significant within the metal detecting community. Many responsible detectorists have used the Herefordshire example to illustrate the importance of following proper procedures and working with archaeologists rather than against them. The case has strengthened arguments for better training and certification of metal detector users and has led to improved cooperation between detecting groups and archaeological organizations. Despite the tragedy of what was lost, the surviving elements of the hoard continue to provide valuable insights into Viking Age Britain. The coins help researchers understand the chronology of early medieval trade, while the decorative metalwork adds to our knowledge of artistic exchange between different cultural groups. Museum displays of the recovered items serve as both educational tools and warnings about the consequences of heritage crime. The empty spaces in museum cases where missing items should have been displayed serve as powerful reminders of the ongoing threat to archaeological heritage. These gaps in the collection tell their own story about the damage that can be done when profit is placed above preservation, when the immediate financial gain of a few is valued more than the long-term educational benefit of many. Some treasures reveal history, as the saying goes, but others expose what we choose to forget about ourselves. The Herefordshire hoard falls into both categories, offering remarkable insights into the Viking world while simultaneously revealing the persistent human tendency to value short-term gain over long-term preservation. In the end, this treasure that should never have been found has taught us as much about modern greed as it has about medieval wealth, serving as both a window into the past and a mirror reflecting our own moral choices in the present. Along the beaches of South Carolina, where the Atlantic Ocean meets the ancient coastal plain in an endless dance of waves and sand, beachcombers occasionally discover something that stops them in their tracks. Lying among the shells and driftwood, dark against the pale sand, are triangular objects that seem too large, too perfect, too ominous to be real. These are the teeth of Herculaneum's Megalodon, the largest predatory shark that ever lived, and each one is a message from a world so alien and terrifying that it challenges our understanding of what the oceans once held. The tooth that sparked the most recent wave of scientific interest measured 16.5 centimeters from tip to root, roughly the size of a human hand. To hold such an object is to confront the reality of a creature so massive that it existed at the very limits of what biology can support. This was not simply a large shark, but something approaching the theoretical maximum size for a marine predator, a living embodiment of the ocean's capacity for creating monsters. Megalodon, whose name means great tooth, ruled the world's oceans for over 15 million years, from approximately 23 million years ago until its extinction around 3.5 million years ago. During this vast span of time, it was the undisputed apex predator of the marine world, a creature so perfectly adapted to killing that it dominated every ocean on Earth. Its reign coincided with a period of global warming that made the seas higher and warmer than they are today, creating an aquatic paradise that could support creatures of unimaginable size. The coastal waters of what is now South Carolina were, during Megalodon's time, part of a vast shallow sea that extended far inland from the current shoreline. This warm, nutrient-rich environment was ideal habitat for the giant shark, providing abundant prey in the form of whales, dolphins, and other marine mammals that had recently evolved to enormous sizes. The fossil record suggests that these ancient seas teemed with life on a scale that modern oceans can barely match. Understanding the true size of Megalodon requires a leap of imagination that most people find difficult to make. Based on the largest teeth discovered, scientists estimate that the biggest individuals could have reached lengths of 18 meters or more, roughly the size of a modern school bus. But size alone does not convey the true nature of this predator. Megalodon was not just large, it was perfectly proportioned for killing, with jaws that could open wide enough to swallow a small car and a bite force that has been calculated at over 40,000 pounds per square inch. The teeth themselves are marvels of evolutionary engineering. Unlike human teeth, which must last a lifetime, shark teeth are constantly replaced throughout the animal's life. A single megalodon might have produced over 40,000 teeth during its lifetime, each one designed for a specific purpose in the complex process of capturing and consuming prey. The serrated edges could slice through whale blubber like a knife through butter, while the massive root anchored each tooth firmly in the jaw during the tremendous forces generated by feeding. The discovery of megalodon teeth along the South Carolina coast is not accidental. The geological processes that preserve fossils work best in certain environments, and the coastal plains of the southeastern United States provide ideal conditions for the preservation of marine fossils. As ancient seas retreated and advanced over millions of years, they left behind layers of sediment that entombed the remains of countless marine creatures, creating a fossil record that is both rich and accessible. The process by which these ancient teeth reach modern beaches is a complex dance of erosion, transport, and deposition that has been going on for millions of years. Storm waves and currents constantly rework the sediments of the continental shelf, gradually exposing fossil-bearing layers that were deposited when the region lay beneath ancient seas. The teeth, being made of dense enamel that resists decay, survive this process while softer tissues decompose, eventually washing ashore as solitary messengers from the deep past. Finding a megalodon tooth on a beach is like discovering a piece of an alien world, evidence of an ecosystem so different from our own that it might as well have existed on another planet. The oceans of the Miocene and Pliocene epochs, when Megalodon ruled the seas, were warmer, more productive, and filled with creatures that have no modern equivalents. Giant whales with teeth instead of baleen plates roamed waters where massive sharks competed for prey in an endless cycle of predation and survival. The extinction of Megalodon remains one of the great mysteries of paleontology. A creature that had dominated the oceans for 15 million years simply vanished from the fossil record around 3.5 million years ago, apparently unable to adapt to changing conditions that other marine predators survived with relative ease. The timing of this extinction coincides with the beginning of the current Ice Age cycle, which brought cooler temperatures and lower sea levels that may have disrupted the giant shark's preferred habitat. Several theories have been proposed to explain Megalodon's disappearance. Climate change certainly played a role, as the cooling of the oceans would have reduced the productivity that supported the massive food webs necessary to sustain such large predators. The evolution of more efficient baleen whales may have created competition for food resources, while the appearance of new predators like the great white shark could have put pressure on juvenile megalodons. Most likely, it was a combination of factors that gradually undermined the giant shark's dominance until it could no longer maintain viable populations. The popular fascination with Megalodon extends far beyond scientific interest into the realm of myth and legend. The idea that such creatures might still exist in the deepest parts of the ocean captures imaginations in ways that few extinct animals can match. This modern mythology has been fueled by sensationalized documentaries, social media hoaxes, and the simple human tendency to populate the unknown depths with monsters from our worst nightmares. The scientific reality is that Megalodon is almost certainly extinct. The ocean ecosystems that supported it no longer exist, and the absence of any credible evidence for living specimens makes their survival extremely unlikely. Modern great white sharks, impressive as they are, represent only a fraction of Megalodon's size and power. The largest great whites rarely exceed 6 meters in length, making them comparative minnows next to their prehistoric cousins. Yet the mythology persists, perhaps because Megalodon represents something fundamental about our relationship with the sea. The ocean remains one of the least explored environments on our planet, with vast areas that have never been seen by human eyes. In these unknown depths, it is easy to imagine that prehistoric monsters might still lurk, unchanged since the age when they ruled supreme. The discovery of living fossils like the coelacanth, thought extinct for millions of years until rediscovered in 1938, only adds fuel to such speculation. The study of Megalodon teeth has revealed surprising details about the behavior and ecology of these ancient predators. Analysis of tooth shape and wear patterns suggests that Megalodons were not indiscriminate killers but sophisticated hunters that employed different strategies depending on their prey. Young Megalodons appear to have fed primarily on fish and smaller marine mammals, while adults specialized in hunting the large whales that were becoming increasingly common during the Miocene epoch. The geographic distribution of Megalodon teeth provides insights into the ancient ocean currents and climate patterns that shaped their world. Teeth have been found on every continent except Antarctica, indicating that these sharks were truly global in their distribution. However, the highest concentrations are found in areas that were once warm, shallow seas, suggesting that Megalodons preferred coastal waters where prey was abundant and temperatures were optimal for their massive metabolism. Modern technology has allowed scientists to extract far more information from Megalodon teeth than previous generations of researchers could have imagined. Chemical analysis of tooth enamel can reveal details about ancient ocean temperatures, while isotope studies provide information about the food webs that sustained these giant predators. Computer modeling based on tooth and jaw reconstructions has allowed researchers to calculate bite forces and feeding mechanics with unprecedented accuracy. The teeth continue to wash ashore along the South Carolina coast with each tide, each storm, each shift in the eternal dance between land and sea. Beachcombers search the tide line at dawn, hoping to be the first to spot the telltale triangle of black enamel against the sand. Museums display the largest specimens as crown jewels of their fossil collections, while scientists continue to analyze them for clues about life in ancient oceans. The discovery of each new tooth is a reminder of the impermanence of dominance in the natural world. Megalodon ruled the oceans for 15 million years, a span of time so vast that it encompasses the entire evolutionary history of many modern species. Yet even this supreme predator eventually succumbed to the inexorable forces of environmental change, leaving behind only scattered teeth as evidence of its former reign. The beaches of South Carolina serve as a window into this lost world, a place where the boundaries between past and present blur with each incoming wave. Children build sand castles while their parents search for shark teeth, unaware that they are walking on the remains of an ocean that once teemed with giants. The teeth they find, polished smooth by millions of years of tumbling in sand and surf, are all that remains of creatures that were once the most fearsome predators on Earth. In the end, the story of Megalodon is a story about scale, about the capacity of life to reach extremes that challenge our imagination. These were not simply large sharks, but creatures that existed at the very boundaries of what is biologically possible. Their teeth, scattered across the beaches of the world like dark reminders of ancient power, speak to the ocean's ability to nurture monsters and the ultimate futility of even the mightiest predators in the face of changing times. Even extinct, some creatures never stop haunting us. They lurk in the shadows of our imagination, in the depths we have never explored, in the fossil record that continues to yield its secrets one tooth at a time. Megalodon may be gone, but its legacy lives on in every dark triangle of enamel that surfaces from the waves, carrying with it the memory of a time when giants ruled the seas and the ocean itself was a different, more dangerous, more wondrous place than anything we know today. In the vast expanse of the Andaman Sea, where monsoon winds push towering waves across waters that have carried traders and explorers for thousands of years, a fishing boat spotted something that should not have existed. Rising from the horizon like a steel phantom, a massive container ship drifted alone, its hull riding high and empty, its decks swept clean by years of wind and rain. This was the Sam Ratulangi PB 1600, a vessel that had vanished from shipping records nearly 2 decades earlier, now returned from whatever maritime limbo had claimed it, carrying secrets of the sea that challenge our understanding of how ships live and die. The discovery of the Sam Ratulangi in 2018 sent ripples of fascination and mystery through the maritime community. Here was a ship that had been built in 2001, a relatively modern vessel equipped with all the navigation and communication equipment that the 21st century could provide. Yet somehow it had managed to disappear from human knowledge and reappear like something from another age, a ghost ship in the truest sense of the term. The Sam Ratulangi was not a small craft that might easily be overlooked in the vastness of the ocean. It was a substantial container ship, over 100 meters long and designed to carry thousands of tons of cargo across the world's shipping lanes. Such vessels are tracked constantly by satellite systems, monitored by port authorities and followed by insurance companies with obsessive attention to detail. For a ship of this size to simply vanish and then reappear requires a confluence of circumstances that seems almost impossible in our hyper-connected world. The story of the Sam Ratulangi begins in the shipyards where it was constructed, a product of the global shipping industry that moves 90% of the world's trade across the oceans. Built to standard specifications with steel hull plating, diesel engines, and cargo handling equipment, it was designed to be profitable rather than memorable, one of thousands of similar vessels that form the invisible backbone of international commerce. There was nothing particularly remarkable about its construction or early service history that would have predicted its eventual fate as a maritime mystery. For the first years of its operational life, the Sam Ratulangi followed predictable patterns, loading and unloading cargo at ports across Asia, maintaining regular schedules and generating the steady profits that justify the enormous investments required to build and operate modern merchant vessels. The ship's crew would have known every sound of its engines, every quirk of its steering, every corner of its labyrinthine interior spaces. It was their workplace, their temporary home, and for some, their entire world for months at a time. The circumstances that led to the Sam Ratulangi's disappearance are rooted in the complex economics of international shipping, where vessels are bought and sold like commodities. Flags of convenience allow ships to operate under the laws of countries they may never visit, and the line between legitimate business and maritime fraud can become dangerously blurred. The ship's registration history shows a pattern of ownership changes and flag transfers that is not uncommon in the industry, but can create gaps in oversight and accountability. The specific incident that removed the Sam Ratulangi from normal shipping operations occurred during what was supposed to be a routine voyage. The ship encountered severe weather in the Bay of Bengal, a body of water notorious for sudden storms that can overwhelm even modern vessels. During the height of the storm, the ship's towing cables snapped, setting it adrift in conditions that made rescue or recovery impossible. What happened next would remain a mystery for nearly 2 decades. When a ship is lost at sea under normal circumstances, there are established procedures for search and rescue, insurance claims, and eventual write-offs. But the Sam Ratulangi fell into a regulatory grey area where its status became unclear. The vessel was being towed when it broke free, which raised questions about whether it was technically under the control of its crew or the towing vessel. Different insurance policies and national jurisdictions had different opinions about who was responsible for the ship and what should be done about its disappearance. The ocean where the Sam Ratulangi drifted for nearly 2 decades is one of the busiest shipping regions in the world, with hundreds of vessels passing through every day. Yet somehow this substantial container ship managed to avoid detection by satellite surveillance, radar systems, and the thousands of eyes that constantly scan these waters for hazards to navigation. The ship had effectively become invisible, drifting with currents and winds that carried it across thousands of miles of open ocean. The physics of how a ship can drift undetected for so long involves understanding the complex patterns of ocean currents, seasonal weather systems, and the limitations of maritime surveillance technology. Even in our satellite-monitored world, the ocean remains vast enough to hide substantial objects from routine observation. Ships that are not actively transmitting their position, not following established shipping lanes, and not making port calls can effectively disappear into the blue emptiness that covers most of our planet. During its years of drift, the Sam Ratulangi would have been subjected to the slow but relentless forces that eventually claim all ships left to the mercy of the sea. Salt spray would have corroded metal surfaces, UV radiation would have degraded plastics and paint, and the constant motion of waves would have gradually loosened fittings and opened seams. Yet the ship's basic structure proved remarkably durable, surviving storms and conditions that might have sunk lesser vessels. The ecosystem that developed around the drifting ship during its years at sea represents one of the more fascinating aspects of its story. Marine organisms have a remarkable ability to colonize any stable surface in the ocean, and the Sam Ratulangi would have gradually transformed from a sterile steel structure into a floating reef teeming with life. Barnacles, algae, and other marine organisms would have covered every submerged surface, while the ship's interior spaces might have become home to fish, crabs, and other creatures seeking shelter in the artificial cave system created by its holds and compartments. The rediscovery of the Sam Ratulangi in 2018 was as accidental as its original disappearance. The fishing vessel that spotted it was conducting routine operations when the massive hull appeared on their horizon, initially mistaken for another fishing boat or perhaps a naval vessel. Only as they drew closer did the crew realize they were looking at something that had been missing from human knowledge for the better part of 2 decades. The condition of the ship when it was found told the story of its long journey through time and ocean. The superstructure was heavily corroded, with paint faded to unrecognizable colors and metal surfaces eaten away by years of salt exposure. The cargo holds, which had been empty when the ship broke free from its tow, were filled with rainwater and debris accumulated during years of drift. Yet the basic hull remained intact, a testament to the robust construction standards of modern shipbuilding. The investigation into the Sam Ratulangi's reappearance raised more questions than it answered. Maritime authorities had to reconstruct the ship's probable path during its years of drift, a complex calculation involving ocean current data, weather records, and computer modeling of how an unmanned vessel would behave in different conditions. The results suggested that the ship had traveled thousands of miles, possibly circumnavigating large portions of the Indian Ocean before finally being spotted near Myanmar. The legal status of the Sam Ratulangi upon its rediscovery presented unprecedented challenges for maritime law. Who owned a ship that had been presumed lost for nearly 20 years? What were the responsibilities of the authorities who found it? How should insurance claims that had been settled decades earlier be handled? The ship existed in a legal limbo that reflected the inadequacies of international maritime law when confronted with truly unusual circumstances. The environmental implications of the Sam Ratulangi's long drift also raised important questions about maritime pollution and the responsibilities of ship owners. During its years at sea, the vessel had undoubtedly leaked fuel, hydraulic fluids, and other potentially harmful substances. The marine organisms that had colonized its hull represented an artificial ecosystem that might have transported invasive species across ocean basins, potentially disrupting established biological communities. The story of the Sam Ratulangi highlights the paradox of modern shipping, where vessels that are precisely tracked and monitored can somehow slip through the cracks of human oversight and become lost to knowledge if not to physical existence. The ship's long odyssey demonstrates that even in our interconnected world, the ocean remains large enough and mysterious enough to hide substantial secrets for decades at a time. The eventual fate of the Sam Ratulangi was less romantic than its mysterious reappearance might have suggested. Classified as a hazard to navigation and an environmental threat, the ship was towed to a ship-breaking facility where it was cut apart and recycled, its steel plates and machinery returning to the industrial processes that had created it decades earlier. The floating ecosystem that had developed around its hull was destroyed, its inhabitants dispersed back into the vast ocean that had sheltered them for so long. The demolition of the Sam Ratulangi marked the end of one of the more unusual chapters in maritime history, but it also raised awareness about the thousands of other vessels that have disappeared over the centuries and might still be drifting in remote corners of the world's oceans. Satellite technology and improved tracking systems have made such disappearances less likely, but the vastness of the sea ensures that mysteries will continue to emerge from its depths. The legacy of the Sam Ratulangi lives on in the questions it raised about maritime law, environmental responsibility, and the limits of human knowledge in an interconnected world. The ship's story reminds us that the ocean remains one of the last frontiers on our planet, a place where the unexpected can still happen and where the boundaries between the known and unknown remain frustratingly fluid. In maritime folklore, ghost ships are vessels doomed to sail forever, never reaching port, never finding rest. The Sam Ratulangi was a ghost ship of a different sort, a modern vessel that slipped through the cracks of bureaucracy and surveillance to spend nearly 2 decades in a liminal state between existence and non-existence. Its eventual rediscovery and destruction brought closure to its story, but also served as a reminder that in the vast emptiness of the ocean, some vessels never reach port, but they don't stop sailing, drifting through time and space like steel memories of humanity's eternal relationship with the sea. On a summer day in 2021, archaeologists working along the ancient shoreline of Herculaneum made a discovery that brought the final moments of Pompeii's sister city into sharp and heartbreaking focus. There, preserved in the volcanic deposits that had entombed the city for nearly 2,000 years, lay the skeleton of a man who had almost escaped the catastrophe that claimed his world. His bones told a story of desperate flight, of hope nearly fulfilled, and of the cruel randomness that determines who lives and who dies when mountains explode and civilizations end in fire. The skeleton belonged to a man in his 40s, someone who had lived through the prosperity and confidence of the early Roman Empire, who had watched gladiators fight in amphitheaters and shopped in markets filled with goods from across the known world. He had experienced what many historians consider the golden age of Roman civilization, a time when engineering marvels like the Pantheon and the Colosseum were rising from Roman soil, and the empire's borders stretched from Britain to the Euphrates River. But on the morning of August 24th in the year 79 AD, all of that confidence and prosperity meant nothing. Mount Vesuvius, which had slumbered peacefully for centuries, suddenly roared to life with an explosion that could be heard hundreds of miles away. The mountain literally blew its top, sending a column of ash and pumice over 30 kilometers into the sky, creating a mushroom-shaped cloud that blocked out the sun and began raining death on the cities below. The man whose skeleton was discovered in 2021 had lived in Herculaneum, a seaside resort town that catered to wealthy Romans seeking relief from the heat and noise of the capital. The city was smaller than nearby Pompeii but more elegant, with luxurious villas overlooking the Bay of Naples and sophisticated amenities that reflected the refined tastes of its inhabitants. Many of the buildings were decorated with elaborate frescoes and mosaics that revealed a community deeply invested in art, culture, and the pleasures of civilized life. When Vesuvius began its deadly eruption, the residents of Herculaneum initially thought they might have time to escape. Unlike Pompeii, which was quickly buried under a rain of ash and pumice, Herculaneum was positioned in such a way that the initial volcanic fallout largely bypassed the city. This geographic accident gave the inhabitants several hours to gather their possessions and attempt to flee, creating a false sense of security that would prove tragically misplaced. The man found in 2021 had used those precious hours to collect his most valuable possessions. Clutched in his skeletal hands was a wooden box, and near his body, archaeologists found a bronze key that had probably unlocked that very container. The preservation was so remarkable that researchers could see not only the bones themselves, but also traces of the clothing he had worn, the leather of his belt, and even the organic residues of his final meal. The contents of the wooden box remain a mystery, as the organic materials it once contained had long since decomposed. But the fact that this man chose to risk his life carrying it suggests that whatever was inside held enormous personal or financial value. Perhaps it contained the family's savings, accumulated over years of careful management. Maybe it held important documents, deeds to property, or letters from loved ones. Or it might have contained jewelry, heirlooms passed down through generations, objects that represented not just wealth but identity and continuity. The key found near his body adds another layer of poignancy to the story. Bronze keys in ancient Rome were not mass-produced items but carefully crafted tools that opened specific locks. This key represented security, privacy, and control over one's possessions. The man had probably carried it with him every day, a tangible symbol of his place in the social and economic hierarchy of Roman society. That he still held it in death suggests he never gave up hope of using it again. The preservation of organic materials at Herculaneum is one of the miracles of volcanic archaeology. The pyroclastic flows that eventually engulfed the city were so hot, over 600 degrees Celsius, that they instantly carbonized organic materials rather than simply burning them away. This created a unique preservation environment where wooden objects, papyrus scrolls, food items, and even human tissues survived in forms that allowed detailed scientific analysis nearly 2 millennia later. The analysis of the man's remains revealed details about his final moments that are both scientifically fascinating and emotionally devastating. The position of his skeleton suggests he was running toward the ancient shoreline when he was overtaken by the pyroclastic flow. He had made it to within meters of the beach where boats were waiting to evacuate refugees, close enough to salvation that he might have been able to see the vessels that represented his last hope of survival. The volcanic deposits around his body tell the story of how quickly death came when the pyroclastic flows finally reached Herculaneum. These superheated avalanches of gas, ash, and rock moved at speeds of over 100 kilometers per hour, giving people no time to take shelter or even to understand what was happening. The man who had clutched his wooden box and bronze key was probably killed instantly, his final breath seared by air hot enough to melt copper. But the volcanic preservation that killed him also created an extraordinary archaeological record. His skeleton shows signs of excellent health and good nutrition, evidence of a prosperous life in one of the Roman world's most desirable locations. His teeth were well maintained, his bones showed no signs of hard physical labor, and his overall physique suggests someone who had enjoyed the benefits of Roman civilization without suffering its hardships. The clothing fragments preserved around his skeleton provide insights into the fashion and social status of Herculaneum's residents. The quality of the textiles and the presence of metal ornaments suggest he was well dressed for his attempted escape, possibly wearing his finest clothes either because he was attending some social function when the eruption began, or because he wanted to save his best garments along with his other valuables. The discovery of this skeleton adds to our understanding of the social dynamics that played out during Herculaneum's final hours. Archaeological evidence suggests that the city's evacuation was not chaotic panic, but a relatively organized effort that gave priority to women, children, and the elderly. Many of the skeletons found along the ancient shoreline belonged to adult men, suggesting that they stayed behind to help others escape before attempting to save themselves. The man with the wooden box and bronze key represents thousands of individual tragedies that unfolded when Vesuvius erupted. Each person who died that day had their own story, their own hopes and fears, their own desperate calculations about what was worth saving and what could be left behind. The archaeological record preserves these human moments with a clarity that is both illuminating and heartbreaking. The broader context of the Vesuvius eruption reveals how unprepared the ancient world was for natural disasters of this magnitude. While the Romans were master engineers who built roads, aqueducts, and buildings that lasted for centuries, they had no scientific understanding of volcanic processes and no early warning systems that might have saved lives. The eruption came as a complete surprise to people who had lived in the shadow of the mountain for generations without considering it a threat. Modern volcanological analysis of the 79 AD eruption has revealed its awesome scale and complexity. The explosion released thermal energy equivalent to thousands of nuclear weapons, ejecting over 4 cubic kilometers of material into the atmosphere. The pyroclastic flows that killed the man at Herculaneum reached temperatures that would have instantly vaporized any organic material they encountered, creating preservation conditions that exist nowhere else in the archaeological record. The contrast between Herculaneum and Pompeii in terms of preservation and discovery has provided archaeologists with complementary insights into Roman urban life. While Pompeii offers a broader view of a complete ancient city, Herculaneum provides more detailed preservation of organic materials and human remains. Together, they create an unparalleled window into the daily life of the Roman world at the height of its power and prosperity. The emotional impact of discoveries like the man with the wooden box extends far beyond their scientific value. These finds force us to confront the humanity of people who lived 2,000 years ago, to recognize that their hopes, fears, and final desperate moments were fundamentally similar to our own. The archaeological record becomes not just a collection of artifacts and data, but a series of human stories that bridge the gap between ancient and modern experience. The ongoing excavation and analysis of Herculaneum continues to yield new discoveries that add layers of detail to our understanding of the city's final day. Each skeleton, each household object, each fragment of preserved organic material contributes to a growing picture of how an entire civilization can be frozen in time by the sudden violence of natural forces beyond human control. The preservation conditions that claimed the man's life also ensured that his story would survive to be told. His skeleton, his wooden box, and his bronze key became time capsules that carried a message across nearly 2 millennia, a testament to the fragility of human plans in the face of geological forces that operate on scales beyond our comprehension. The study of volcanic disasters like the Vesuvius eruption has taken on new urgency in our modern world, where millions of people live in the shadow of active volcanoes. The man who died clutching his possessions at Herculaneum serves as a reminder that technology and civilization offer no guarantee of safety from the fundamental forces that shape our planet. The bronze key he carried in his final moments has become a powerful symbol of human hope and determination. Even in the face of overwhelming disaster, he had not given up on the future, had not accepted that his carefully ordered world was ending. The key represented his belief that somewhere ahead lay safety, security, and the chance to rebuild what had been lost. The wooden box he protected with his life reminds us that in moments of crisis, people often choose to save not just valuable objects but pieces of their identity, fragments of the life they have built and hope to preserve. What seemed important enough to risk death for may never be known, but the fact that he made that choice speaks to the deeply human need to maintain connection with the things that give life meaning. His final moments survived what he could not, preserved in volcanic glass and ash that turned tragedy into scientific treasure. The man who almost escaped Vesuvius became instead a messenger from the past, his story written in bone and artifact. His final desperate flight transformed into a bridge across time that allows us to witness both the fragility and the persistence of human hope in the face of forces beyond our control. 3 miles off the coast of Key Biscayne, Florida, where the warm waters of the Gulf Stream flow over sandy bottom that has never known the touch of sunlight, lies one of the most extraordinary memorials ever conceived by human imagination. Here, 40 feet beneath the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, an artificial city rises from the seafloor, its neoclassical columns and archways creating a vision that seems torn from the pages of mythology. This is the Neptune Memorial Reef, a place where death and life intertwine in ways that challenge our traditional understanding of both remembrance and conservation. The Neptune Memorial Reef represents a radical reimagining of how we honor the dead while serving the living world around us. Unlike traditional cemeteries with their manicured lawns and marble headstones, this underwater necropolis is designed to grow and change, to become not just a repository for human remains, but a thriving ecosystem that supports marine life for generations to come. It is simultaneously a mausoleum and a coral reef, a place of mourning and a celebration of life's capacity for renewal and transformation. The concept began with a simple recognition that both human burial practices and marine conservation efforts were facing similar challenges in the modern world. Traditional cemeteries require enormous amounts of land in areas where space is increasingly precious, while coral reefs around the world are dying at alarming rates due to pollution, climate change, and human interference. The Neptune Memorial Reef offered an elegant solution that addressed both problems simultaneously, creating habitat for marine life while providing a meaningful alternative to conventional burial. The design of the underwater city draws inspiration from the lost civilization of Atlantis, with classical architecture that evokes both ancient grandeur and timeless permanence. Massive concrete structures shaped like temples, columns, and ceremonial platforms create an artificial topography that is both hauntingly beautiful and functionally sophisticated. The concrete used in construction is specially formulated to have a pH level that encourages coral growth, essentially turning each memorial structure into a foundation for new life. The process of creating a memorial in this underwater city begins long before the cremated remains ever reach the ocean floor. Families work with marine biologists and memorial designers to choose locations and structures that reflect their loved ones' personality and interests. Some prefer the grand columns that rise like ancient temples from the sandy bottom, while others choose smaller, more intimate spaces tucked into artificial caves and grottos. The cremated remains are carefully mixed into concrete that forms the memorial structures themselves, literally incorporating the deceased into the foundation of this growing reef ecosystem. This process, known as reef ball technology, creates structures that are both permanent memorials and ideal surfaces for coral attachment and growth. Over time, the stark concrete surfaces become living gardens of coral, sponges, and marine plants that transform each memorial into a unique work of natural art. The location of the Neptune Memorial Reef was chosen with careful attention to oceanographic conditions that would maximize both marine habitat value and memorial permanence. The site lies in water that is deep enough to be protected from storms and shallow enough to receive sufficient sunlight for coral photosynthesis. The Gulf Stream's proximity ensures constant water circulation that brings nutrients and oxygen while carrying away waste products, creating ideal conditions for marine life to flourish. Diving to the Neptune Memorial Reef is an experience that defies easy description. Descending through the clear blue water of the Florida Straits, visitors first see vague shapes in the distance, shadows that gradually resolve into the familiar forms of classical architecture. As they draw closer, the true scale of the underwater city becomes apparent, with structures that rival ancient temples in their grandeur and ambition. But what strikes visitors most is not the architecture itself, but the life that has claimed it. Every surface is covered with a living carpet of marine organisms, from tiny barnacles and tube worms to massive brain corals and colorful sponges. Fish move through the water in clouds of silver and gold, taking shelter in the artificial caves and feeding on the rich community of smaller organisms that have made their homes among the memorial structures. The transformation of the reef from sterile concrete to living ecosystem happens remarkably quickly in the warm waters of the Florida Current. Within months of installation, the first colonizers arrive, microscopic larvae of corals and other marine animals that settle on the prepared surfaces and begin the slow process of building new homes. Within a few years, structures that began as simple concrete forms become complex, three-dimensional habitats that support hundreds of species of marine life. The scientific value of the Neptune Memorial Reef extends far beyond its function as a memorial site. Marine biologists use the reef as a living laboratory for studying coral growth, fish behavior, and ecosystem development in artificial environments. The controlled conditions and known history of the reef structures provide researchers with unique opportunities to understand how marine communities develop and change over time. The success of coral growth on the memorial structures has exceeded even the most optimistic projections of the reef's designers. Species that have struggled to survive on natural reefs damaged by bleaching events and pollution have thrived in the protected environment of the memorial reef. Some areas of the Neptune Memorial Reef now support more diverse and abundant marine life than comparable natural reefs in the region. The families who choose the Neptune Memorial Reef as a final resting place for their loved ones often speak of finding comfort in the knowledge that death has become a source of new life. Instead of bodies slowly decomposing in the sterile environment of a traditional cemetery, their cremated remains have become part of a living system that grows more beautiful and complex with each passing year. The memorial is not static but dynamic, constantly changing as marine life adds new chapters to its story. The underwater memorial services conducted at the Neptune Memorial Reef are unlike anything in traditional funeral practice. Family members and friends don scuba gear to descend to the memorial site, where they can place flowers, say prayers, or simply spend quiet time in the presence of their loved one's final resting place. The experience of weightlessness in the warm ocean water, surrounded by abundant marine life, creates a sense of peace and connection that many find deeply meaningful. The ecological impact of the Neptune Memorial Reef has been overwhelmingly positive, contributing to marine conservation efforts in an area where natural reefs have suffered significant damage from human activities. The artificial structures provide hard surfaces for coral attachment in an environment where natural rock formations are scarce, essentially expanding the total reef habitat available in the region. The legal and regulatory framework that governs the Neptune Memorial Reef represents groundbreaking cooperation between environmental agencies, funeral industry regulators, and marine conservation organizations. The project required permits from multiple federal and state agencies, each with their own concerns about environmental impact, public health, and long-term sustainability. The successful navigation of this complex regulatory landscape has created a model for similar projects around the world. The economic impact of the Neptune Memorial Reef extends throughout the local marine tourism industry. Dive operators offer regular trips to the site, bringing visitors who contribute to the local economy while developing a deeper appreciation for marine conservation. The reef has become a destination for underwater photographers, marine biologists, and spiritual seekers who find meaning in this unique fusion of human remembrance and natural renewal. The expansion of the Neptune Memorial Reef continues as demand for this alternative form of memorial grows among families seeking meaningful ways to honor their deceased loved ones while contributing to environmental conservation. New sections of the underwater city are planned and constructed regularly, each one designed to blend seamlessly with existing structures while providing new opportunities for marine life colonization. The maintenance of the Neptune Memorial Reef requires ongoing attention from both marine biologists and memorial site managers. Regular monitoring ensures that the artificial structures remain stable and that the marine ecosystem continues to develop in healthy directions. Occasionally, invasive species must be removed, or structural repairs must be made to ensure the long-term integrity of both the memorial and conservation functions of the site. The philosophical implications of the Neptune Memorial Reef challenge traditional Western attitudes toward death and memorialization. Instead of preserving the dead in static, unchanging monuments, this underwater city embraces transformation and renewal as central elements of the memorial experience. The deceased become part of an ongoing story of life and growth rather than subjects of preservation and stasis. The international attention that the Neptune Memorial Reef has received has inspired similar projects around the world, from the Mediterranean to the Pacific. Each new underwater memorial reef must be adapted to local environmental conditions, cultural practices, and regulatory requirements, but the basic concept of combining human remembrance with marine conservation has proven broadly appealing. The psychological impact of the Neptune Memorial Reef on grieving families often differs significantly from their experiences with traditional burial sites. The knowledge that their loved ones' remains are contributing to the growth of new life, That the memorial site becomes more beautiful and vibrant with each passing year provides a sense of ongoing connection and purpose that many find healing and meaningful. The educational value of the Neptune Memorial Reef extends to visitors who may have little prior knowledge of marine ecosystems or conservation challenges. The combination of human interest and environmental education creates powerful learning experiences that often inspire visitors to become advocates for marine conservation in their own communities. The future of the Neptune Memorial Reef and similar projects around the world depends on continued cooperation between environmental scientists, funeral industry professionals, and families seeking meaningful alternatives to traditional burial practices. As awareness of both marine conservation needs and environmental burial options grows, underwater memorial reefs may become increasingly common features of coastal waters around the world. The Neptune Memorial Reef stands as a testament to human creativity in addressing complex challenges through innovative solutions that serve multiple purposes simultaneously. By combining the deeply personal need for meaningful memorialization with the urgent environmental imperative of marine habitat restoration, this underwater city has created something entirely new in human experience. A city for the dead, growing coral and memory alike. The Neptune Memorial Reef represents a fundamental shift in how we think about the relationship between human death and natural life. In its columns and arches, where fish swim among the incorporated remains of human loved ones, we see a vision of death not as ending but as transformation, not as separation from life, but as integration into its ongoing cycles of growth, change, and renewal. In the turquoise waters of Southeast Asia, where coral reefs create underwater gardens of impossible beauty and abundance, live people who have adapted to the sea in ways that challenge our understanding of human biology. The Bajau, known as the sea nomads of the Coral Triangle, have spent over 1,000 years living almost entirely on and beneath the water, developing physical adaptations that allow them to dive to depths and hold their breath for periods that would kill ordinary humans. They represent evolution in action, proof that our species continues to change and adapt even in the modern world. The Bajau people inhabit a vast area of ocean stretching across the waters of Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines, a region that encompasses some of the most biodiverse marine ecosystems on Earth. For generations beyond counting, they have made their homes on boats, on stilt houses built over coral reefs, and in floating villages that rise and fall with the tides. Their entire culture is built around intimate knowledge of the sea, its rhythms, its dangers, and its endless capacity to provide for those who understand its ways. To watch a Bajau diver at work is to witness something that seems to transcend normal human limitations. They descend to depths of over 70 meters with nothing but a simple wooden mask and hand-carved spears, their lungs compressed to a fraction of their normal size, their hearts slowing to conserve oxygen in ways that would trigger panic responses in most people. They can remain underwater for over 10 minutes at a time, navigating the complex three-dimensional maze of coral reefs with the ease of birds flying through familiar forests. The traditional Bajau lifestyle represents one of the most complete adaptations to marine environments ever achieved by human beings. Entire families live on boats called lepa-lepa, elegant wooden vessels that serve simultaneously as homes, workshops, and transportation. These boats are perfectly adapted to life among coral reefs, with shallow drafts that allow them to navigate waters too shallow for larger vessels and flexible construction that can flex with waves without breaking. The children of the Bajau learn to swim before they can walk, spending their days playing in water that would challenge experienced divers from other cultures. By the time they reach adolescence, many can dive to depths that require specialized equipment and training for outsiders to achieve safely. Their entire education takes place in and around the water, learning to read currents, weather patterns, and the subtle signs that indicate where fish can be found. The scientific study of Bajau diving abilities has revealed remarkable physiological adaptations that distinguish them from other human populations. Most dramatically, the Bajau have developed enlarged spleens, organs that play a crucial role in storing oxygenated red blood cells that can be released into circulation during long dives. This adaptation, controlled by genetic variants that are found almost exclusively in Bajau populations, provides them with a biological advantage that allows them to survive in environments that would quickly prove fatal to others. The discovery of these genetic adaptations represents one of the clearest examples of recent human evolution ever documented by science. The genes responsible for enlarged spleen size appear to have emerged and spread through Bajau populations within the last few thousand years, a time span that is essentially instantaneous in evolutionary terms. This rapid adaptation demonstrates that human evolution did not stop with the development of agriculture or civilization, but continues to shape our species in response to environmental pressures. The enlarged spleen adaptation works in concert with other physiological changes that optimize the Bajau body for diving. Their lungs show increased capacity and flexibility, allowing them to take in more oxygen before a dive and to compress more efficiently under pressure. Their blood chemistry includes higher concentrations of hemoglobin, the protein that carries oxygen in red blood cells, providing additional oxygen-carrying capacity that extends their underwater endurance. The cultural knowledge that accompanies these biological adaptations is equally remarkable. Bajau divers possess an intimate understanding of underwater physics, pressure dynamics, and decompression effects that allows them to avoid the nitrogen narcosis and decompression sickness that plague recreational divers. They have developed techniques for equalizing pressure, managing oxygen consumption, and navigating underwater that represent thousands of years of accumulated wisdom about human survival in marine environments. The traditional fishing methods of the Bajau demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of marine ecology that modern fisheries science is only beginning to appreciate. They practice selective harvesting techniques that maintain the health of coral reef ecosystems, taking only what they need and allowing fish populations to recover between harvesting periods. Their fishing practices are guided by complex traditional calendars that track spawning cycles, migration patterns, and seasonal changes in fish behavior. The boats that serve as homes for traditional Bajau families are marvels of maritime architecture, perfectly adapted to life in tropical waters. Built without blueprints using techniques passed down through generations, these vessels combine shallow draft with seaworthiness, storage capacity with living space, and durability with the flexibility needed to survive in dynamic marine environments. Every element of their construction reflects intimate knowledge of how materials behave in salt water, how boats move in waves, and how to create livable space in the confined quarters of a small vessel. The social organization of Bajau communities reflects their adaptation to marine environments. Traditional leadership structures are based on navigation skills, diving ability, and knowledge of ocean conditions rather than the land-based concepts of territory and agriculture that characterize most human societies. Marriages and alliances are often arranged to share knowledge of productive fishing grounds or to gain access to different areas of the vast marine territory that Bajau communities inhabit. The spiritual beliefs of the Bajau are intimately connected to the sea and its creatures. They practice forms of animism that recognize the consciousness and agency of marine animals, coral reefs, and ocean currents. Their religious ceremonies often take place on or near the water, and many of their most important cultural artifacts are designed to ensure harmony between human communities and the marine environment that sustains them. The traditional Bajau diet consists almost entirely of foods obtained from the sea, supplemented by limited amounts of rice and other agricultural products obtained through trade with land-based communities. Their nutritional needs are met through sophisticated understanding of marine food webs, seasonal availability of different species, and techniques for preserving fish and other seafood for periods when diving conditions are poor. The modern world poses unprecedented challenges to traditional Bajau culture and their unique adaptations to marine life. Government policies that require fixed addresses and formal education systems designed for land-based populations create pressure for Bajau families to abandon their traditional lifestyle. Overfishing by industrial operations depletes the marine resources that traditional Bajau communities depend on, while pollution and climate change degrade the coral reef ecosystems that support their way of life. The loss of traditional Bajau culture represents more than just the disappearance of an exotic lifestyle. These communities possess irreplaceable knowledge about sustainable marine resource management, human adaptation to aquatic environments, and techniques for living in harmony with ocean ecosystems. Their genetic adaptations represent a unique human heritage that could provide insights into medical treatments for conditions related to oxygen deprivation and pressure adaptation. Climate change poses particular threats to Bajau communities because of their dependence on coral reef ecosystems that are especially vulnerable to ocean warming and acidification. Rising sea levels threaten the shallow reef areas where traditional Bajau villages are located, while changing weather patterns disrupt the seasonal cycles that guide traditional fishing practices. The coral bleaching events that are becoming increasingly common destroy the foundational ecosystems that support the marine food webs that Bajau communities depend on. The scientific study of Bajau genetic adaptations has broader implications for understanding human evolution and the speed with which our species can adapt to new environments. The relatively recent emergence of these diving-related genetic variants suggests that human evolution continues to operate much more rapidly than previously believed, with significant adaptations appearing within historical rather than prehistoric timeframes. Modern medicine is beginning to appreciate the potential value of understanding Bajau physiological adaptations for treating conditions related to oxygen deprivation and pressure exposure. The mechanisms that allow Bajau divers to survive extended periods underwater could provide insights into treatments for stroke, heart attack, and other conditions where oxygen supply to vital organs is compromised. Their natural resistance to decompression sickness could inform the development of better safety protocols for commercial and recreational divers. The preservation of Bajau culture and genetic heritage represents a unique conservation challenge that combines anthropology, genetics, ecology, and human rights. Efforts to document and preserve traditional knowledge must be balanced with respect for community autonomy and the right of Bajau people to choose their own path forward in the modern world. Some communities are adapting their traditional practices to modern circumstances, while others are choosing to integrate more fully into land-based societies. The younger generation of Bajau people face particularly complex choices about how to balance traditional knowledge and modern opportunities. Many are drawn to formal education and urban employment opportunities, but this often requires abandoning the diving skills and cultural knowledge that represent thousands of years of adaptation to marine environments. Some communities are developing innovative approaches that combine traditional practices with modern technology and education. The documentation of Bajau diving techniques and physiological adaptations has attracted attention from free diving enthusiasts and researchers interested in extending human underwater capabilities. However, attempts by outsiders to replicate Bajau diving achievements often fail to appreciate the cultural context and lifetime training that make these abilities possible. The skills that allow Bajau divers to survive at extreme depths are not just physical adaptations but integrated systems of knowledge, technique, and cultural practice. The future of the Bajau people and their unique adaptations to marine life depends on finding ways to preserve their cultural heritage while adapting to the changing realities of the modern world. This may require innovative approaches to education, conservation, and community development that respect traditional knowledge while providing access to modern opportunities and technologies. The story of the Bajau reminds us that human evolution is not a process that ended in the distant past, but continues to shape our species in response to environmental challenges and opportunities. Their genetic adaptations to life in the sea represent proof that evolution doesn't always take millions of years, that sometimes it only takes the sea and the human capacity to adapt to whatever challenges the environment presents. In the crystal-clear waters where Bajau divers still descend to impossible depths with nothing but their own enhanced biology, we see a vision of human potential that extends far beyond the limitations we normally accept. They have become something new while remaining recognizably human, proving that our species contains possibilities we are only beginning to understand, and that the boundary between human and environment is far more fluid than we usually imagine. On the windswept Isle of Skye, where ancient stones stand sentinel against the endless Scottish sky and the sound of waves has echoed through valleys for countless millennia, archaeologists uncovered something so rare and precious that it changed our understanding of how music connected the Celtic world. Buried in the peaty soil of a Bronze Age settlement, preserved by the unique chemistry of highland bogs, lay a fragment of carved yew wood that had once been part of a stringed instrument. This was no ordinary artifact, but the bridge of a lyre that had sung its songs over 2,300 years ago, making it the oldest known stringed instrument ever discovered in Western Europe. The fragment was small, barely the length of a human hand, but its significance was immense. Carved from the heartwood of a yew tree that might have been centuries old when it was felled, the bridge showed clear evidence of the wear patterns that come from years of use. Microscopic analysis revealed the grooves where strings had rested, the subtle polishing that results from the vibration of tensioned gut or sinew, and the careful shaping that indicates this was the work of a master craftsman who understood both the physics of sound and the art of making beautiful music. The discovery challenged long-held assumptions about the musical traditions of prehistoric Britain. While archaeologists had found Bronze Age horns, drums, and various percussion instruments, evidence for sophisticated stringed instruments had remained elusive. The Celtic world was known from later historical sources to have rich musical traditions, but direct physical evidence for these practices in the prehistoric period had been largely absent from the archaeological record. The lyre bridge from Skye represents far more than just an ancient musical instrument. It provides a tangible connection to the soundscape of Celtic Britain, a link to the songs, stories, and ceremonies that bound together communities across the ancient landscape. Music in the prehistoric world was not entertainment in the modern sense, but a fundamental technology for preserving and transmitting culture, a way of encoding knowledge, history, and spiritual beliefs in forms that could survive the passage of generations. The yew wood from which the bridge was carved tells its own story about the sacred and practical significance of this remarkable tree in Celtic culture. Yew trees can live for thousands of years, making them powerful symbols of continuity and endurance. The wood itself is both flexible and strong, properties that make it ideal for musical instruments that must withstand the constant tension of strings while resonating clearly. The choice of yew for this instrument was not accidental but reflected deep cultural associations between this wood and the realms of music, memory, and the sacred. The preservation of organic materials in the peat bogs of Scotland creates unique windows into the prehistoric past. The acidic, oxygen-poor environment of highland bogs can preserve wood, leather, textiles, and even human remains for thousands of years, creating archaeological time capsules that offer unparalleled insights into ancient life. The lyre bridge survived because it was deposited in conditions that prevented the normal processes of decay, essentially freezing it in time until modern excavation techniques could bring it back to light. The craftsmanship evident in the surviving fragment suggests that the instrument from which it came was the work of a specialist, someone who possessed not only woodworking skills, but also deep understanding of musical acoustics. The precise angles of the string grooves, the careful shaping of the bridge profile, and the selection of appropriate wood all point to sophisticated knowledge about how to create instruments that would produce clear, resonant tones. The context in which the lyre bridge was found provides clues about its role in ancient Celtic society. The Bronze Age settlement where it was discovered shows evidence of metalworking, pottery production, and other craft activities that suggest this was a community of some importance and prosperity. The presence of a sophisticated musical instrument reinforces the picture of a society that valued not just practical skills, but also the arts that made life meaningful and beautiful. The reconstruction of the complete instrument from the surviving bridge fragment required collaboration between archaeologists, musicologists, and craftspeople who specialize in historical instrument making. Using the physical evidence from the bridge combined with knowledge of similar instruments from other cultures and time periods, researchers were able to create working replicas that provide insights into how the original instrument would have sounded. The experimental archaeology of recreating the Skye lyre revealed the sophisticated understanding of acoustics that ancient instrument makers possessed. The dimensions and positioning of the bridge, the likely size and shape of the soundbox, and the probable string arrangements all point to an instrument capable of producing complex music with multiple voices and harmonic possibilities. This was not a simple folk instrument, but a sophisticated musical technology that could support elaborate compositions and performances. The role of music in Celtic society extended far beyond entertainment or artistic expression. Music was a technology for memory, a way of encoding and preserving information in societies that relied primarily on oral tradition rather than written records. Songs and musical patterns served as mnemonic devices that helped preserve genealogies, territorial boundaries, agricultural knowledge, and religious beliefs across generations. The discovery of the lyre bridge also illuminates the trade networks and cultural connections that linked prehistoric Scotland to the broader Celtic and European world. Stringed instruments similar to the reconstructed sky lyre are known from archaeological sites across Europe, suggesting that musical traditions and possibly musical instruments themselves were shared across vast distances through networks of trade, migration, and cultural exchange. The spiritual and ceremonial functions of music in Celtic culture were closely tied to beliefs about the power of sound to influence the natural and supernatural worlds. Instruments like the sky lyre would have played crucial roles in religious ceremonies, seasonal festivals, and rites of passage that marked important transitions in individual and community life. The music they produced was not just aesthetic but functional, believed to have the power to communicate with deities, ancestors, and the forces that governed the natural world. The technical analysis of the lyre bridge has revealed details about ancient string-making and tuning systems that provide insights into the sophisticated musical theory that guided Celtic instrument makers. The spacing and depth of the string grooves suggest that the instrument was designed to accommodate strings of different thicknesses and tensions, allowing for complex tuning arrangements that could support both melodic and harmonic playing styles. The preservation and study of the sky lyre bridge represents a triumph of modern archaeological science, demonstrating how new analytical techniques can extract extraordinary amounts of information from even small and fragmentary artifacts. Microscopic analysis, chemical testing, and computer modeling have all contributed to our understanding of this remarkable object and its place in the musical traditions of ancient Europe. The reconstruction of ancient Celtic music based on archaeological evidence like the sky lyre bridge has become an active field of research that combines archaeology, musicology, and experimental performance. Musicians and researchers work together to explore how these ancient instruments might have sounded, what kinds of music they could have produced, and how they might have been integrated into the social and ceremonial life of Celtic communities. The emotional impact of hearing reconstructed ancient music performed on replicas of instruments like the sky lyre creates powerful connections across thousands of years of human experience. The melodies and harmonies that emerge from these recreated instruments offer glimpses into the inner lives of people who lived in a world so different from our own yet shared the fundamental human need for beauty, meaning, and artistic expression. The broader implications of the sky lyre discovery extend to our understanding of cultural complexity and artistic achievement in prehistoric societies. The sophistication of the instrument and the skill required to create it challenge simplistic notions about the capabilities and interests of Bronze Age peoples. These were communities that valued not just survival and prosperity, but also the creation of beautiful and meaningful art. The ongoing research into Celtic musical traditions and their archaeological evidence continues to reveal new insights into how music functioned in ancient societies. Each new discovery adds pieces to a puzzle that helps us understand how sound, rhythm, and melody were woven into the fabric of daily life in ways that are sometimes difficult for modern people to appreciate. The legacy of the sky lyre extends beyond its immediate archaeological and musical significance to broader questions about cultural continuity and change. The musical traditions that this instrument represents did not disappear with the end of the Bronze Age, but evolved and adapted, influencing the development of later Celtic music that continues to resonate in the modern world. The preservation of the lyre bridge in the peat bogs of Skye serves as a reminder of how much of the human past remains hidden beneath our feet, waiting to be discovered by future generations of archaeologists and researchers. Each artifact that emerges from the earth carries with it the potential to revolutionize our understanding of ancient life and to connect us in new ways to the experiences of our predecessors. The story of the sky lyre bridge illustrates the power of music to transcend time and cultural boundaries, creating connections between people separated by thousands of years. The melodies that once emerged from this instrument may be lost forever, but the knowledge that they once existed enriches our understanding of human creativity and the universal importance of music in human culture. The fragment of yew wood found on Skye represents more than just an ancient musical instrument. It is a bridge across time, a connection to a world where music was not just entertainment, but a fundamental technology for preserving culture, communicating with the divine, and creating the social bonds that held communities together. When words fail, the past sings, and in the silence of the archaeological record, objects like the Skye Lyre Bridge allow us to hear echoes of songs that once filled the ancient air with beauty and meaning. On a calm December morning in 1925, the steamship SS Cotapaci departed Charleston, South Carolina, bound for Havana with a cargo of coal and the confident expectation of routine passage through waters that had carried commerce between North America and the Caribbean for centuries. The ship never reached its destination. For 93 years, the Cotapaci existed only in shipping records, insurance files, and the increasingly fantastic legends that grew around its disappearance. Then, in 2018, marine archaeologists working off the coast of Florida made a discovery that brought the missing vessel back to reality and, in the process, demonstrated how easily facts can be transformed into fiction when human imagination encounters the vast unknowns of the sea. The SS Cotapaci was a typical merchant vessel of the 1920s, a steam-powered cargo ship built for efficiency rather than elegance. At 250 feet in length, it was substantial enough to handle rough weather but small enough to navigate the shallow ports of the Caribbean trade routes. The ship represented the kind of workmanlike vessel that formed the backbone of international commerce in the era before containerization revolutionized maritime transport. The crew of 32 men who sailed aboard the Cotapaci that December morning were experienced mariners who had navigated these waters countless times before. Captain W.J. Myers had commanded merchant vessels for over 2 decades, earning a reputation for reliability and seamanship that made him a trusted choice for routine cargo runs. The ship's manifest listed a full load of coal destined for Cuban power plants, a cargo that was both valuable and essential for the island's growing industrial economy. The weather conditions at the time of departure were favorable, with clear skies and moderate winds that promised an uneventful journey. The route from Charleston to Havana was well established, following shipping lanes that were regularly traveled by dozens of vessels each week. Navigation aids, radio communication, and weather reporting services were all functioning normally, creating what appeared to be ideal conditions for safe passage. Yet somewhere in the waters between Charleston and Havana, the SS Cotapaci vanished without a trace. No distress signal was received, no wreckage was found, and no survivors ever came forward to explain what had happened to the ship and its crew. The vessel simply disappeared from human knowledge, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a growing sense of mystery that would capture imaginations for decades to come. The initial search efforts for the missing Cotapaci followed standard maritime protocols of the era. Coast Guard vessels and aircraft scoured the probable route, while other ships in the area were alerted to watch for signs of wreckage or survivors. The search continued for several weeks, covering thousands of square miles of ocean, but found no trace of the missing vessel. Eventually, the Cotapaci was declared lost with all hands, and the families of the crew members were left to grieve without ever knowing what had happened to their loved ones. The disappearance of the SS Cotapaci might have remained just another maritime tragedy, a footnote in the long history of ships lost at sea, if not for the emergence of a cultural phenomenon that would transform the missing vessel into something far more significant than its original owners could ever have imagined. In 1964, nearly 4 decades after the ship's disappearance, author Vincent Gaddis coined the term Bermuda Triangle to describe an area of the Atlantic Ocean where ships and aircraft were alleged to disappear under mysterious circumstances. The Bermuda Triangle, also known as the Devil's Triangle, was said to encompass a roughly triangular area between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. According to the growing mythology surrounding this region, vessels and aircraft that entered these waters were subject to unexplained disappearances that defied conventional explanation. The SS Cotapaci, which had vanished decades earlier in waters that could arguably be considered part of this triangle, became one of the flagship cases cited by believers in supernatural explanations for maritime mysteries. The transformation of the Cotapaci from a routine shipping casualty into a supernatural mystery illustrates how cultural narratives can reshape historical facts to serve contemporary needs and anxieties. The 1960s and 70s saw growing public interest in paranormal phenomena, UFO sightings, and alternative explanations for unexplained events. The Bermuda Triangle myth provided a framework for organizing these interests around a specific geographic location and a collection of mysterious disappearances that seemed to support theories about supernatural or extraterrestrial intervention in human affairs. Books, television documentaries, and popular magazine articles about the Bermuda Triangle featured the SS Cotapaci prominently, often describing its disappearance in terms that emphasized the mysterious and unexplained aspects of the case while downplaying more mundane possible explanations. The ship became a symbol of the ocean's capacity to swallow vessels without explanation, a maritime Flying Dutchman that sailed through popular culture long after it had vanished from the physical world. The scientific community, however, remained skeptical of supernatural explanations for maritime disappearances in the supposed Bermuda Triangle. Marine meteorologists pointed out that the area encompassed some of the most heavily traveled shipping lanes in the world, making the absolute number of incidents less significant than the rate of disappearances relative to traffic volume. Oceanographers noted that the region was subject to sudden weather changes, strong currents, and underwater topography that could create hazardous conditions for navigation. Statistical analysis of shipping casualties in the area allegedly covered by the Bermuda Triangle showed that the rate of disappearances was not significantly higher than in other heavily traveled maritime regions with similar environmental conditions. The Gulf Stream, which flows through part of the supposed triangle, is known for its ability to quickly disperse wreckage and carry debris far from the sites of maritime accidents, making it more difficult to locate evidence of ships that have been lost in these waters. For decades, the SS Cotapaci remained suspended between historical fact and popular myth, its actual fate unknown, while its legendary disappearance continued to fuel speculation about supernatural forces operating in the waters off the American coast. The ship became more famous for its mysterious vanishing than it had ever been during its working life, achieving a kind of immortality through its association with one of the most enduring maritime legends of the modern era. The resolution of the Cotapaci mystery came not through supernatural revelation, but through the patient application of modern marine archaeology and underwater survey technology. In 2018, a team of marine archaeologists working with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration was conducting surveys of artificial reefs off the coast of St. Augustine, Florida, when their sonar equipment detected the outline of a large shipwreck in an area where no vessel was known to have been lost. The underwater investigation that followed revealed the remains of a steam-powered merchant vessel of approximately the right size and age to be the missing SS Cotapaci. The wreck lay in relatively shallow water, only about 40 feet below the surface, in a location that had been within the search area covered during the original Coast Guard investigation in 1925. The discovery raised immediate questions about how the vessel could have remained undetected for nearly a century in such an accessible location. The answer lay in the dynamic nature of the marine environment off the Florida coast, where strong currents, shifting sands, and seasonal storms constantly reshape the underwater landscape. The wreck had been buried and reburied multiple times over the decades, sometimes completely hidden beneath shifting sediments and sometimes partially exposed by the same currents that had covered it. The timing of its discovery was largely fortuitous, occurring during a period when natural processes had exposed enough of the wreck to make it detectable by modern sonar equipment. The identification of the wreck as the SS Cotapaci required careful comparison of the vessel's dimensions, construction details, and cargo remains with historical records of the missing ship. The presence of coal in the ship's holds, the vessel's size and configuration, and the construction techniques evident in the wreck all matched what was known about the Cotapaci from shipping records and contemporary photographs. Carbon dating of wooden elements from the wreck confirmed that the vessel dated to the appropriate time period. The condition of the wreck provided clues about the circumstances that led to the ship's sinking. Evidence of hull damage suggested that the vessel had probably foundered during rough weather, possibly after taking on water through compromised hull plating or damaged cargo holds. The scattered nature of the wreckage indicated that the ship had broken apart either during the sinking process or through decades of exposure to currents and storm action on the ocean floor. The discovery of the Cotapaci wreck also shed light on the limitations of search and rescue technology in the 1920s. The Coast Guard vessels and aircraft that had searched for the missing ship were equipped with navigation and detection equipment that was primitive by modern standards. The wreck's location, while within the general search area, would have been difficult to detect using the sonar and diving technology available at the time of the ship's disappearance. The weather records from December 1925, examined with the benefit of modern meteorological understanding, revealed that the Cotapaci had probably encountered a severe storm system that developed rapidly as the ship traveled through the Straits of Florida. Such storms were less predictable with the weather forecasting technology of the 1920s, and ships often found themselves caught in dangerous conditions with little advance warning. The human cost of the Cotapaci disaster became more poignant with the discovery of the wreck and the ability to piece together a more complete picture of what had happened to the ship and its crew. The 32 men who died when the vessel sank were not victims of supernatural forces, but of the same combination of human limitations and natural hazards that had claimed countless ships throughout maritime history. The rediscovery of the SS Cotapaci provided an opportunity to examine how cultural myths develop around unexplained events and how those myths can persist even when scientific evidence suggests more prosaic explanations. The ship's association with the Bermuda Triangle legend had made it famous, but it had also obscured the real human tragedy of its loss and the legitimate scientific questions about maritime safety and navigation that its disappearance raised. The case of the SS Cotapaci illustrates the ongoing tension between scientific skepticism and popular fascination with the mysterious and unexplained. While the discovery of the wreck provided a rational explanation for the ship's disappearance, it did little to diminish public interest in Bermuda Triangle theories or other supernatural explanations for maritime mysteries. The human desire to find wonder and mystery in the world appears to be stronger than the desire for complete rational explanation. The legacy of the SS Cotapaci extends beyond its role in maritime mythology to broader questions about how we investigate and understand the past. The ship's rediscovery demonstrated the value of systematic scientific investigation and the power of modern technology to solve historical mysteries that had previously seemed inexplicable. It also highlighted the importance of maintaining rigorous standards of evidence when evaluating claims about unexplained phenomena. The story of the Cotapaci serves as a reminder that the ocean remains one of the least explored environments on our planet, with thousands of shipwrecks still waiting to be discovered and countless maritime mysteries still unsolved. While modern navigation and communication technology has made disappearances like that of the SS Cotapaci much less likely, the vastness of the sea ensures that it will continue to hold secrets and surprises for future generations of explorers and investigators. The final chapter of the SS Cotapaci story brings closure to one of the most enduring maritime mysteries of the 20th century, but it also opens new questions about the dozens of other vessels that have disappeared in these waters over the centuries. Some disappearances are mysteries wrapped in cultural narratives that may obscure more than they illuminate. Others are simply waiting for someone to ask the right question, to look in the right place, to apply the right technology to problems that have puzzled investigators for decades or centuries. The ocean gives up its secrets reluctantly, but it does give them up, one discovery at a time, one wreck at a time, one answered question leading to new mysteries that wait in the depths for future generations to explore and understand. The sea returns what it chooses. The earth reveals its stories grain by grain. Through these quiet hours, we have journeyed together across continents and centuries, diving beneath the surface of the everyday world to discover the forgotten depths that lie just beyond our ordinary awareness. From the ancient boat that waited in the mud of the Sea of Galilee to the artificial islands rising from Scottish lochs, from fires that burned when our world was young to treasures scattered by greed and time, each story has been a thread in the vast tapestry of human experience that connects us all to the mystery of what came before. We have walked with fishermen who cast their nets in waters that knew the footsteps of empires, stood with craftsmen who shaped islands from stone and timber, using nothing but human will and ancient wisdom. We have felt the heat of fires that burned 250,000 years ago, touched by the same need for warmth and light that draws us to our own hearths today. We have witnessed the tragic beauty of lives cut short by volcanic fury and the hopeful innovation of memorial reefs where death becomes the foundation for new life. In the depths we have explored tonight, time moves differently than it does in our daily world. A 2,000-year-old boat emerges from a drought like yesterday's news. A Viking treasure waits centuries to reveal the greed of the men who found it. A ship drifts for decades through ocean currents, becoming legend before returning to reality. A fragment of ancient music bridge allows us to hear echoes of songs that once filled the highland air with melody and meaning. These discoveries remind us that the boundary between past and present is far more permeable than we usually imagine. The ancient world is not gone, merely transformed, waiting in museum cases and archaeological sites in the genetic adaptations of sea peoples and the coral gardens growing on memorial reefs. Every artifact that emerges from earth or water is a message sent across the vastness of time, proof that human experience creates connections that transcend the apparent finality of death and forgetting. The people whose stories we have shared tonight lived in worlds that seem impossibly distant from our own, yet their fundamental needs and desires were remarkably similar to ours. They sought safety and prosperity, beauty and meaning, connection with others, and harmony with the natural forces that shaped their lives. They built boats to cross dangerous waters, created islands where none existed, tended fires against the darkness, and made music to fill the silence with joy and remembrance. The technologies they used were different from ours. Their understanding of the world was filtered through different cultural frameworks, but their humanity was identical to our own. The fishermen who sailed the Sea of Galilee 2,000 years ago worried about storms and catches just as modern fishermen do. The craftsmen who built crannogs in ancient Scotland understood the physics of weight and buoyancy as clearly as any modern engineer. The musicians who played lyres on the Isle of Skye felt the same emotional power of melody and rhythm that moves us today. What lies beneath still rises, not just from the physical depths of earth and ocean, but from the depths of human memory and imagination. The stories we have explored tonight continue to surface in our consciousness because they speak to something eternal in the human experience. They remind us that we are part of a continuous narrative that stretches back to the very beginning of our species and forward into a future we can only dimly imagine. The scientific methods that allow us to recover and understand these ancient stories represent one of humanity's greatest achievements. The patient work of archaeologists, marine biologists, historians, and countless other researchers has given us the ability to reach across enormous spans of time and touch the lives of people who lived when the world was young. Every carbon date, every careful excavation, every fragment of preserved organic material adds another piece to the puzzle of human experience. But science alone cannot capture the full meaning of these discoveries. The emotional resonance of holding a 2,000-year-old coin, of diving to an underwater memorial reef, of listening to music reconstructed from ancient fragments, requires something beyond analysis and measurement. It requires imagination, empathy, and the willingness to see in these material remains the hopes and dreams of people who were, in all the ways that matter, exactly like ourselves. The preservation of these stories and artifacts represents a profound responsibility that we share with past and future generations. Every decision about what to study, what to preserve, what to display in museums, and what to protect from destruction helps determine which voices from the past will be heard by future generations. The men who stole and destroyed the Viking treasure violated this trust, while the families who choose memorial reefs and the scientists who study ancient adaptations honor it. The threats facing our archaeological and cultural heritage are both ancient and modern. Natural forces of erosion, climate change, and geological upheaval continue to bury some sites while exposing others. Human activities, from development to warfare, from looting to simple neglect, determine which pieces of the past survive to tell their stories. The rising seas that may claim coastal archaeological sites are the same waters that preserve shipwrecks and occasionally return long-lost treasures to the light. In our interconnected modern world, these ancient stories take on new relevance and urgency. The genetic adaptations of the Bajau people offer insights into human evolution that could inform medical treatments. The sustainable fishing practices of ancient Scottish islanders provide models for modern conservation efforts. The memorial reefs growing in Florida waters suggest new approaches to both environmental restoration and human remembrance. The mysteries that remain unsolved remind us that for all our technological sophistication, vast areas of human experience remain unexplored and unexplained. Every answered question reveals new puzzles. Every discovered artifact suggests thousands more waiting in the darkness. The ocean floors hold countless shipwrecks whose stories have yet to be told. The Earth contains archaeological sites that could revolutionize our understanding of human history. The sky above holds secrets about climate and environment that could help us understand both past and future. The wonder that draws us to these forgotten depths is the same curiosity that drove our ancestors to build boats and cross dangerous waters, to create art and music, to adapt their bodies to new environments, and to reach always towards something larger than their immediate circumstances. This wonder is not just about the past, but about the ongoing human capacity for discovery, creativity, and connection across time and space. As we drift towards sleep, carried by these stories like passengers on an ancient boat crossing dark waters toward distant shores, we can take comfort in knowing that we are part of something vast and continuing. The same curiosity that led to the discoveries we have shared tonight continues to drive researchers and explorers who are, even now, uncovering new pieces of the human story. Tomorrow will bring new discoveries, new connections between past and present, new evidence of the remarkable creativity and adaptability that defines our species. The archaeological record is not complete and never will be. Time destroys more than it preserves, and chance plays a huge role in determining which artifacts survive to tell their stories. But what does survive carries extraordinary power to connect us with the experiences of people who lived in times and places we can only imagine. In their struggles and achievements, their daily routines and moments of crisis, we see reflections of our own humanity that help us understand both where we came from and where we might be going. The forgotten depths we have explored tonight are not really forgotten at all. They live on in the objects that surface from earth and water, in the genetic codes that carry the memories of ancient adaptations, in the cultural traditions that preserve echoes of prehistoric practices, and in the human imagination that finds meaning and connection in the material remains of the past. They remind us that nothing truly important is ever completely lost, that human experience creates currents that flow through time like underground rivers, occasionally breaking the surface to remind us of their presence. For every artifact unearthed, 1,000 more remain hidden beneath waves, within walls, under centuries of silence. And in the space between what we know and what we wonder, between the discovered and the lost, lies the endless mystery that connects us all to the forgotten depths of time. We are not separate from the deep past, we are its continuation, and the more we uncover, the more we remember who we have always been. The stories continue beneath the waves and beyond the horizon, waiting for the next tide to carry them home.